Hi, everybody. Welcome to another perfect launch of Stratosphere Studios, which is our entertainment-based show here at BillWhittle.com. Everything's running like clockwork as usual. No computer problems, no audio problems. Everything just dandy. 25 minutes of dandiness later, here we are. Hope everybody's doing well. We're going to be trying to deal with, like I said, entertainment questions on Mondays, and Thursdays we do our political stuff. So, there was one thing on the entertainment thing that, it's a new YouTube channel that I've been watching. I just want to make sure I get the name right. You think I would after all the videos I saw here. Hang on a second. Hang on. Yeah. Okay. I probably should have known about this guy a long time ago, but I didn't. His name, I almost said his name is, but his name was Kevin Samuels. And I saw a bunch of his videos, and then I would, I'd see like, 6 or 7 of them. And then I would see one that says RIP as I went. I let that go. And then I did it again, saw another RIP, so I looked him up. So Kevin Samuels, some people called him the Godfather, was a guy who was basically doing, he was basically knocking the stupid out of an entire generation, 2 generations of people. And his videos are fantastic. He's like a bit like Simon Cowell in that way. He's absolutely fearless. He's not going to pull any punches. People call in voluntarily. It's not like he calls people up randomly and, forces them to submit to this thing. But honestly, I can't believe how effective this guy was. Let's see if this makes a difference. Hey, there's a little better. Kevin Samuels was just an incredibly great guy. His main thing really was dealing with these women that would call in, these young women. It's mostly a program for men, but the stuff that I saw was these young women would call in. This entire 2 generations would call in. I think this is an entertainment-related thing, and we'll get to the other stuff, fun stuff in a minute. But the amount of delusion is almost unbelievable. How much these women would come in, and you'd see these completely ordinary people, and he'd ask you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. And every one of them, I'm a 10, I'm a 10, I'm a 10. Really? No one more beautiful than you? Beyonce's not more beautiful than you? Nope. 10, 10, 10. Anyway, very erudite, beautifully dressed, immaculate, just extremely well-decorated set, and by and large, the epitome of calm. And I thought, wow, it's just incredible. And then, like I said, I saw a couple of RIPs, and then I found out he just keeled over, had a heart attack, died of stress, basically. Hypertension. No, the Gorn is no closer. That's ridiculous. It's a cardboard cutout. It's not capable of moving. It's simply right where it's always been. And I think maybe you need to seek psychiatric. Yeah, it just, and I think it was like in early 50s. It just killed him. And he was really something. His ability to communicate was really exceptional. And I bring this up from the entertainment show rather than the political show because he attracted the kind of people who hated to hear what he wanted to say. You get these young women calling in talking about Kevin Samuels, and they would call in and argue with him that they really were 9s and 10s. He would just say, how tall are you? 5'3". What do you weigh? 176. You're a 4. And so his delivery was so I'll get this right eventually. His delivery was so authentic. That's the word I'm looking for. Authentic. And I learned a lot from him, and I'm very sorry to hear that he died way before his time. Somebody said in the comments, I just saw it a second ago, was it? That Pearly Things, she's terrific too. This young lady who basically is going out there trying to, snap people out of it. Anyway, this is the entertainment show, so let's talk about some entertainment. The scripts for Empire Terror are coming along. We're practically done. I've still got 1.5 to do. We're shooting on March 6th. That date is getting closer. So that's going to be good news. And I think I'm just using that to tee off because I was just looking through one of these online, model houses, Turbo Squid and CG Trader and that kind of thing. And I usually just go through, I don't know what it is with this shirt, but it's really bugging me. And I usually just go through and, just look at the new stuff. And I'm looking at this new stuff and then new textures and stuff. And it's like, I want to get back into this so badly. So, here we are in this enforced hiatus. Here's a question I really like. Dual Monitor on YouTube says, are you still friends with Rachel Lucas? I'll always be friends with Rachel Lucas, but I haven't talked to her in 10 years, I think. I really just don't think no, I haven't talked to her in 10 years. I've always assumed that people who, after 10 years, there's like the giant changing, everybody's everybody's email address changed around the same time, like 8 years ago, 9 years, 10, 11, 12 years, or something like that. Everybody went from being here or whatever, now everybody's on Gmail. But Rachel Lucas is the reason I'm here. She and a few others. Glenn Reynolds at Instapundit linked to my stuff. Steve Dembest at USS Clues. But it was Rachel Lucas who asked for some comments. She had a girlfriend who wanted to know whether or not she wanted to buy a gun, whether there was what was the argument to buy a gun. And I just wrote 5 or 6 blog posts, in the comment section about what I thought was a good reason. She said, you really need a blog. And so she did it for me. She built Eject. Just did it. And without her help, I'm sure I would have just, would have fallen by the wayside as far as YouTube goes. And I'd be, probably president or maybe even at this point, I think, supreme leader of the planet. But in any event, she's just something. Oh, that's a lovely thing to say. Kobo Bunny says, hey, Bill, it's nice to see you live streaming. A little bit of calm and reassurance while I tend to a family member through their cancer treatments. Thank you. I know that all of us are pulling for you, and you have certainly in my prayers and the prayers of people who are religious on this. Some are, some aren't. If you are, send some love that way. Somebody wants to describe this to me in a way that made me understand it because I've been a materialist my entire life. And basically somebody said that the act of prayer is not the act of you talking to God, it's the act of you listening. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And a lot of what's going on now that's so appalling is based on just a fundamental lack of humility. And it's kind of what I was just talking about a minute ago with Kevin, where people think that everybody's a 10. Everybody is a 10. And so when everybody's a 10, everybody's entitled to everything, and that's one of the problems we have. So here's a $20 super chat, hooray, from the Scorch 191. Hi, Bill, kind of pop culture related, but you should look up the Papers, Please short film and game. It's a movie about a game about the monotony of being an East-West German border guard, shows the stresses of the job very well. I'd love to see that. And I have not seen, and you thought I thought you would have thought I would have seen it by now. And maybe I will, actually. And that's The Lives of Others, which I've heard just tremendous things about, but I haven't seen. It's about a member of the Stasi, the East German secret police, KGB, basically. And he sits and listens to other people. And they become people, I guess, instead of targets. Pretty much every time I do this show or the Stratosphere Lounge show, virtually all the time, I'm coming off of at least 2 hours of writing this Empire of Terror thing for the last 5-6 months now, I think. And it kind of colors your perception of things. I just talked about, Lenin was shot, nearly killed. That night, they shot 500 hostages in Petrograd. They shot 400 hostages in Kronstadt, just off in the Gulf of Finland. And all around the country, they just shot a few thousand people. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, yeah, but this is nothing. This is nothing. That's what it does to you. It's like when you deal with like these mass exterminations of millions of people, tens of millions of people, and you find out on the first night after Lenin was shot, the Cheka killed 5,000-6,000 people. You almost don't want to include it. It's like this is the problem. It's constantly coming back to the scale. That's the hard part to get across. I don't really have any big announcements to make tonight. Other than I'm just chewing through this stuff. There is an end in sight. There's a calendar end in sight. There's going to be a studio waiting for me, and I'd better be there. So whether I'm finished or not, I will be there. And I have not had a chance to see that Silver Bullet, but I didn't talk to her today, but I'll talk with her about it tomorrow. Excuse me. So what I thought we would do is just do just sort of, I'd like to concentrate mostly on filmmaking questions tonight. And I'll go to the comment section in BillWhittle.com. I'll try to get to Facebook. But right now, just out of the live comments on Twitch and YouTube, I'm just going to look for any kind of movie-related, science fiction-related, screenplay-related kind of question, and I'm just going to take a few live. I feel like doing tonight, actually, since I usually do a 1-hour pre-roll. Hello, Speed of Light from Argentina. Argentina, that blows my mind, honestly. It just blows my mind. Thank you. Good to see you here. Bienvenidos. Dictor Van Doomcock will be proven correct when Mouse House implodes. Yeah, Mouse House is this is more of a political issue, although it is also entertainment. If you haven't seen this latest thing they did with the Pride family, where it's a bunch of like tweens, animated tweens up on a high school talent show, and they're just the chant is slaves built this country, slaves built this country, and you say it often enough, and people will start to believe it. They'll just start to believe it. Disney made that. That's a Walt Disney production. It's on Disney Plus. I think it's Disney Plus. Am I going to see the movie Nefarious when it's released in a month or so? I haven't heard of it. Let me do this because my memory during these shows is not the steel trap that some people who don't know me very well might be led to think. I'm not going to watch the whole trailer. I'm just going to tee it up. Looks like an album. Oh, is it the human trafficking documentary? Is that what we're talking about? That's about the only thing I'm seeing. Excuse me. Hugs from Brazil from Greg Mash, and I'm a quarter Portuguese. Greg, you'd think I know how to say welcome in Portuguese, but I don't. But is that the show we're talking about, the human trafficking thing? Because it's as a movie where a demon takes over America. All right. I didn't see it, but I've got it queued up, so I'll take a look at it afterwards. Maybe we can talk about it next week. I don't have anything to say about it tonight because I don't know anything about it. But that thing is just it's a new low, and that's kind of amazing if you think about it, really, that you can have a new low. But the problem is that a lot of people are going to believe this, that slaves built this country. And slaves didn't build this country. Slaves built the plantation system in the South, but that was destroyed with slavery at the end of the Civil War. And then from that point, black people helped build this country in proportion to their numbers. And so there's nothing that the slaves produced in America that's still here, or even really in any way legacy. They did build an entire economy and keep it running, but that pre-war plantation sitting on a porch sipping a mint julep kind of thing, that went the way of Gettysburg and Fredericksburg and Vicksburg and Sharpsburg and all of those. So it's just a lie. Now, it's not to marginalize black people's contributions to America, but it is definitely designed to marginalize white people's contribution to America. And you think, oh, nobody could believe that. Yeah, they could. Now, Sad Wings Raging says, wasn't just in the South. Well, in fact, not just saying, he's shouting it. I suppose there were slaves in the North, but the cotton economy, King Cotton, requires a certain amount of sunlight to work. And you can't have frozen fields for most of that time. The reason the Civil War happened was because I'm not going to get into the Civil War. It's political stuff. Shouldn't be talking about this anyway. I was only talking about it in relation to the Disney thing. Hey, the Sacred Order of Knightly Valor has a super chat. Because of time dilation, wouldn't hibernation starships from Earth be passed by superior starships developed on Earth while the astronauts were asleep? I'm going to that one because that is an entertainment and a science fiction question. Excuse me. You have landed on one of the most interesting logical outcomes of stellar exploration. In other words, if we ever do get a chance to explore the stars, this is something that will happen. And the real tragedy of it could be, you could launch a ship that would get to the nearest star in 70 years, and maybe 20 years later, some enormous kind of propulsion breakthrough, you could easily be there to greet the people who were the first people. That's actually a really cool idea. I've heard of this dynamic before. So basically, here's how it works. Let's say you're going from here to Alpha Centauri, and you send a bus, and the bus is going 50 miles per hour, which would take a while. But it's going 50 miles an hour, and it's been going 50 miles an hour for, a while. And then all of a sudden, instead of the next bus going 50 miles an hour behind it, now all of a sudden the next bus is doing 240 miles an hour. It's going to pass that first bus, and it's going to arrive there, but the people on the first bus are going to think that they're the first people there. Now, that kind of dynamic, like I say, has been here for a long time. But the one thing I have not heard is what, I haven't seen explored anyway, is what happens to the psychology of the people on the first ship. We're the first ones. We're going to be the first people to this explore the solar system. It's us. G.K. Masterson says Vicksburg represent. Yeah, okay, so Vicksburg's in there too. So the science has been discussed, and it's almost like a kind of an ironic sort of thing. Like, am I peaking in audio? Thank you for saying so. I'm very concerned about the audio. We're on the backup mic tonight. So that's been dealt with, but the psychological aspects of it has not been dealt with it that I'm aware of. I've even heard, or at least thought about, okay, so you overtake the ship, and then you wake the people up and say, hey, you've still got another 60 years to go. Hop on with us. We'll be there in 4. But you can't catch that ship. You're not going to stop. You can't catch that ship. So the thing that I haven't really thought about, and is an excellent idea for the colonies and for anything else, is what does that sense of disappointment feel like? We're going to be there, and we've got our plans to set up the base, and first thing we're going to do is the orbital surveys, and we're going to do this, dedicated our whole lives to this. We've been in hibernation sleep for 25 years on and off, blah, 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 blah. You get there, and it's like, Oh, there's an orbiting space station. There's a complete satellite network. Look at that. There's 500,000 people down there on the planet's surface. And now you're just these dinosaurs that arrive in this dinosaur ship. And no doubt you would be respected, but it'd be kind of a bummer, don't you think? So that only happens, obviously, in interstellar travel, because even the technology cannot advance quickly enough for that to happen within the solar system, because the travel times are relatively short. In other words, you can't wait 20 years to have a big technological breakthrough, because there's nothing in the solar system is more than 20 years away, not even close. Not even close. One of the things that really is shocking, if you've been following space probes the way I have since I was 13, 14, we're launching a mission to Jupiter. Great. Launching it in 2023. Fantastic. When will it get there? 2031. Okay. And the reason that it's going to get there in 2031 is because there is so little delta V available. It's so marginal. There's a term for this. Well, home and transfer orbits are part of it, but there's a term in astrophysics that refer to gravity manifolds. So basically, think of it this way. So you probably at least heard, if you're not terribly familiar with deep space probes, you've probably heard. Let me just say this for the last beat. Scorch for Super Chat says it'd be like Neil landing and finding an American base that's been there for 40 years. Yeah, that's something that really needs to be. That's really something that needs to be described. Anyway, so here's why it takes 5, 6, 7, 8 years just to get to Jupiter. Because the propulsion is so marginal, they don't have the delta V. Let me rephrase that. Believe it or not, it's actually quicker to stay in the inner solar system and get a gravity assist from Earth and Venus or whatever, and so on. So what does that do? What does a gravity assist do? I remember asking Phil this question, and I couldn't figure it out. And then suddenly he explained it to me, and I was like, oh, I'm an idiot. So why would flying past a planet, why would that be something you want to do? It's a gravity assist, makes you go faster. Why? I said, so you accelerate as you go into the planet's gravitational field, right, Phil? Yeah. And then you decelerate as you come out of it, right? It's dragging you back, right? So isn't that a net zero? He says, yes, that's net zero. But the orbital velocity of the planet is the boost. So what it turns out is there are the interactions, the gravitational interactions between the planets mean that, I'm exaggerating here a little bit, it basically means you could get to Jupiter on 5 or 6 SDD rockets, It would just take you forever, because if you've got enough to just get this thing in motion, and you've got the navigational skills, we certainly do, then it's just a question of, I'm going to use this planet to accelerate me, and that's going to take essentially no energy. We're going to coast on a super low energy orbit till we get to this other body, and then we're going to use that body to slow us down, whatever. And so you get to travel for next to nothing. It's just that you want to talk about flying on standby. Now, New Horizons was going to Pluto, and if New Horizons had tried to do this nonsense, it wouldn't have arrived at Pluto till 2040, something like that, right? So New Horizons, they put the burners to that thing. They just kicked that thing in the butt. I don't know how long it took to get to Jupiter. I want to say it was 4 or 5 months. It was less than a year, I'm virtually positive. Because that thing had to be moving fast enough, or else the mission doesn't make sense. Since New Horizons is moving so much faster than like the Voyager probes, I don't know this, I don't know the math, but I'd be willing to bet you that I will probably live to see New Horizons, which was launched, I want to say, in 2009 or something like that, maybe somewhere around there, will pass the Voyager probes that were launched in 79. It's just going so much faster. And so the whole solar system is entirely doable if you have enough thrust. We talked about atomic rockets, nuclear rockets on last Stratosphere Lounge, I think. So that is something. I'm just so tired of this dicking around, you know? I'm really, really tired of it. It's really embarrassing. Why is it going to take 7 years to get there? Well, because we have to make a flyby around Venus, and that'll take 7 months. And then a year and a half later, we make another flyby of Earth and use that second gravity assist to get it. Honestly, we just put some fuel up there. Now, AirTechie says that's what nuclear electric propulsion is for, ion propulsion. And the problem with ion propulsion, we talked about this on the Stratosphere Lounge last time. I'm not going to go dig this all up again, but basically, you have two considerations when you're dealing with propulsion in space. One of them is thrust, and the other one is specific impulse. So thrust is how much push can you get, and specific impulse is essentially, it's not quite, but essentially close enough to miles per gallon. How efficient is the engine? So when I was a kid, and I was coming out of these schools in Bermuda, and I went to 7th grade at Ponce de Leon Junior High in Miami. And I was in a reading class. And I'm not making nothing special about me. I just got a decent education. I finished the week's reading assignment in about 25, 30 minutes. That's what they had to read for the week. So they had this thing called independent studying, a little independent study card. It was a hand-drawn kind of thing. You'd see like a profile of a face, and there'd be the infinity thing, and then inside the head would be the infinity thing. And here's my independent study card. And I just go to the library and do nothing but sit in the library and read about things like this. And so you hear about these ion drives and the super, super high velocity of the way these things come out. Basically, it uses electricity. It's an electric-powered drive that uses a source, usually cesium, if I remember correctly. And it takes these atoms and ionizes them and shoots them out the back with an electromagnet. And its efficiency is incredible, and its thrust is essentially zero. It's got about as much thrust as a snowflake falling on a piece of paper. Now, that snowflake falling on a piece of paper falls long enough, or enough of them fall, then eventually you can get up to pretty good speeds. But that's also dicking around. Ion engines are useless. And it looks like it looks like they are useless by design. I don't see any way you can engineer the ion engine to do what you want it to do. I don't see how you get tremendous efficiency, but you don't get thrust. Now over here, AirTechie says check out the paper on the fusion-powered plasma drive out of Princeton Plasma Labs. I like the sound of Princeton Plasma Labs. Gives you enough thrust to get to Mars in 14 days. See, if you get to Mars in 14 days, all of these other problems are solved, right? Your supply problems are solved. Your habitation problems are solved. Your radiation problems are solved. Your supply problems are solved. If you can get to Mars in 14 days, then great. Nuclear fusion powered plasma drive. Yes. Like we said on the Stratosphere Lounge, it's a shame we didn't do it on this show, but like we said, the key is how hot can you make something? Because in chemical rockets, you're dealing with a fuel like kerosene, methane in some cases, hydrogen, and an oxidizer. And that's the fuel and the propellant. But when you're dealing with something like this, your propellant is just, could be water, but it's just hydrogen. And it doesn't do anything. All it does is you need something to spit out the back of the thing so you can go in that direction. The real fuel is the fuel that powers this fusion thing. So however hot you can get it, the faster you can go. And so this ISP, hey, look at all these new people here. Hey, welcome. We're talking about space engines and things like that. Greetings, hello, and welcome. So Fiery Waco says, what's used for reaction mass? Well, as it turns out, Waco, there's a bunch of things that are useful, and I did a lot of research on this for Aurora. If I remember correctly, and fortunately I'm dealing with a crowd here that can correct me on these things when I'm wrong, hydrogen was the most efficient. Methane was up there. Water was okay. But basically, you just need something. It doesn't have to be something even ionized. You just need mass that you can chuck out the back of the rocket. And so the hotter that rocket gets, the more thrust it produces per pound of fuel, and that means its efficiency, its specific impulse goes up. Now, here's a great question on the Entertainment Show. Super chat from What's a Takeaway says, hey, Bill, what do you think of the Epstein drive from The Expanse? See, this is how I feel. This is why I feel the way I feel about The Expanse. There are parts of it that I liked very much, and parts of it that I just goodbye, you know. And this is a perfect example of this. So, for those of you not familiar with The Expanse, the Expanse is set inside the solar system until the magical aliens arrive, and so they do a burn to midpoint and then flip around and then slow down. I've talked about that before. That's not real efficient. You don't want to continually burn to midpoint. You want to burn as fast as you can so you can get going as fast as you can, as quickly as you can. And then you want the maximum burn at the other end so that you don't have to start slowing down halfway there. The only thing that's useful, that halfway midpoint flip over thing, is to give you gravity. But that's just, that's silly. Anyway, so this is a great example of how I feel about The Expanse. The idea that the guy's invented a drive that when he turns it on, the gravitational acceleration of the drive is so amazing that he can't move out of the chair and he ends up dying in his spaceship is fantastic. Fantastic. He turns this thing on, oh my God, and he's like, I can't move. I can't turn the thing off. I'm just being crushed to death and I can't turn it off. Brilliant. That's really cool storytelling. Really, really cool storytelling. But then you get to this. It's like, so are you a scientist? Did you design this new thing? Is this the result of a lab? Is this the result of a giant project that either Earth or Mars or somebody was working on? No, it was just a guy who bought a ship and he tinkered with it a little bit. And by playing around with the wrenches, and maybe a different kind of a fuel pump or something, he got something like 600 times the amount of propulsion out of it that was before. And that's when I say goodbye, good night, see you, thank you. He's just tinkering with his ship. It's just like a hobby for him. And all of a sudden, he just happens to come across this formula. I guess it's just a mixture of the fuel ratio, or maybe you need to turn a dial up to 11 or something. And then off he goes. And to put those two things together is so frustrating for me as a science fiction writer, because one aspect of it is so interesting and cool, and the other aspect of it is so ridiculous that it just killed the buzz for me. Tell you what I did like in The Expanse. I liked the guy who was like, we're talking about gravitational. Oh my God, Road Rider has I gotta get that last. That's the comment of the night. Yeah, Road Rider 58, he was talking about that ship and he said it's the Maru Su. Brilliant. The Maru Su. Love it. That's just marvelous. So, I'll tell you what I did like. A guy is like, first of all, this is what I like and don't like about The Expanse, right? You got some guy who's like super, super good at navigation. He navigates these gravitational manifolds really, really efficiently and cool. So he's racing. He's constantly winning the race to get from this place to this race because he's really got a hang for all of these things. Okay, all right, that's great. But the guy is like they make him like a drug dealer from downtown Baltimore. He's like, oh, rad, it's really in the hair, and you got the tats and everything. He's like, yeah, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work, right? So I thought, all right, great. And then he is the first one into this Stargate thing. And it turns out the Stargate doesn't like people moving fast. And so basically he's hauling butt into this thing, and his ship hits that field, and he just turns to jelly. That was cool. That was really cool. But again, I have my major problem with The Expanse is one of the core issues with The Expanse, and that is I don't buy this idea of the working proletarian masses in space. I just don't buy it. I just think it's lazy and it's cheap. It assumes that So take the Expanse, right? And let's say you've got, I don't remember the number. Let's say you got 1 million people living on Ceres in the Expanse, okay? And let's say that most of those people are just greasy, low down workers, right? They're beltas and all of this stuff, and they're all just a bunch of they're longshoremen, right? No disrespect to longshoremen, but basically that's what the Expanse plays upon. Is this, there's a lot of class war out there where we're the beltas, and then the inners are always exploiting us. Okay, but just think this through for a second. If you've got 1 million people on Ceres, right, on the asteroid Ceres. Let me say Vesta because Ceres sounds like TV series. Got 500,000 people living on Vesta, and most of them are essentially uneducated. Yeah, that's right. Red wings, sad wings. Yeah, they're space commies, and most of them are the huddled masses. Right? They're low skill, just low paid. From what I've seen on the show, fairly low intellect stuff. So what you're basically saying is you've got room for 500,000 people up there. You've got 8 or 10 or 12 billion people back on Earth, and this is the best you can do. My point about it is if you've got room for 500,000 people on an asteroid, you can pick 500,000 PhD engineers, and there's no room for there's no room for poverty in space. I almost said for poor people. There's no room for poverty in space. It doesn't work, right? It just can't work because of the demands of it. It's like it's a human dynamic. It's not a dramatic convention or affectation, right? If you just think it's through, you just don't get it. In other words, think of this. It's like saying you're a lazy pioneer, right? There were no lazy pioneers. It's contradiction in terms. You could not be a lazy pioneer. You could be lazy or you could be a pioneer, but you can't be a lazy pioneer. You had to work hard. And if you weren't willing to do that, you couldn't survive on the frontier. So when you say, it's all these poor people in space habitats, it's like, this doesn't make any sense at all. You've got, it's not even, some people, see, here's what the problem is. The problem is that it's the politics behind the Expanse. The people that wrote, the guys that wrote the Expanse wanted to have this Marxist kind of idea of the rich elites, these are the innas, and then you've got the poor exploited working class, and these are the beltas. And the whole dynamic is about rich versus poor. It's about exploiting these people. It's nothing but straight up Marxism. And of course, you're designed to feel sympathy for these poor belters who are just essentially just murdered at will by their capitalist overlords as they live in their in their solid steel cells and basically drink beer and think about how to blow up the base. It doesn't make sense. And here's why it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because regardless of how commonplace space is, it's still expensive to get there. And the people you're going to send there have to know what they're doing. There's no reason to have unskilled people in space. Somebody in the comment section said, "Yeah, well, the coal miners or miners aren't the brightest people in the world." And I gave that some quick thought for a second. I thought, that's really actually kind of a good point. But if it's something that required unskilled labor, then it's better to do it with robots, because that's what robots are, is they're unskilled labor. So they had all of their politics built into this thing. And by the way, when I say built into it, I mean built into the opening credit roll. Here are the glaciers melting. Here are the sea levels rising. When you see New York, it's got a seawall all around it, which seems to work pretty well, by the way. And so the whole thing is about Marxism. Now, as it turns out, I'm just coming off of the birth of Marxism in the real world. I mean, I've spent 6 months every day for 6 months living 5-6 hours at the Russian Revolution and the birthplace of this god awful theory. And Marxism was obsolete by the time that Lenin put it in place in 1917. The reason that Russia became the only Marxist country in the world was because Russia was so backwards. And I swear to God, I was writing this an hour ago. An hour ago, I was making this argument. This is fun. It's a political argument, but we're gonna use it to criticize the Expanse and all these poor exploited workers out there out on the frontier and all the rest of this stuff. So stick with me on this, right? Because the Expanse and many other shows have this Marxist view of space exploration. So let's just go through why this is essentially impossible. Okay, so by the way, I'm going to put my glasses on. I hate getting people's names wrong. I hate mispronouncing them even. Rad Robot, cool name, says they weren't sent there, they were born there, and they can't live in the gravity well. That's cool. The idea that they're born on an asteroid and that super thin guy is crushed by the Earth gravity, that's cool. But the idea that you could have a child on a space habitat and afford to have this child not have any skills, that's nuts. It's nuts. Your parents are going to be engineers, and what are you going to be? You're going to be a gangster? No. Now, when you get back on a planet somewhere else, that's another story. Anyway, so the Expanse is about Marxism in space. Lenin. I had this insight, honestly, an hour ago. I've never heard anybody really talk about this before, but I really think I'm onto something here. Because I'm writing a story about the Russian Revolution and all of that stuff. So, after Lenin is shot in 1918, assassination attempt on his life, they really uncorked the Red Terror. And they're going to start going after the kulaks. These are the wealthy peasants, the exploiting classes of peasants. These are the guys who have 2 cows. Right, and the rhetoric, bloodthirsty vampires. They must all be massacred. Right. So Lenin and Stalin later are determined to massacre this peasantry, and I said to myself, okay, Lenin is a Marxist prophet. He is a true believer. He said he fell in love with Marxism when he first saw it. And he is sitting there in exile for 17 years talking about Marxism. He's about Marxism this, and Marx says this, and so on, so on, so on. So he's a Marxist, right? Then all of a sudden, he gets an offer to go to be taken from Zurich, Switzerland, in a German train across Germany, funded by the Germans, to get to Petrograd so he can help kick this revolution, because the Tsar has abdicated and this provisional government's taken over. It's incompetent, but it's essentially democratic, right? So Lenin is on the train from Switzerland to Petrograd. Train's doing less than 30 miles an hour the whole way. So Lenin spends the 2 weeks that he's on this train writing something called the April Theses, his April Theses. And what Lenin had to do in that 2 weeks was he had to figure out a way to invert Marxism so that he could present it to the Russian people. Let me elaborate on this. Lenin is a guy like all the other Marxists who believe that Karl Marx stumbled upon a law of physics that applies to humanity. That's the way they look at it. That's why they believe in it so much. They believe it is science. They don't believe it's philosophy or politics. They think Marxism is science. And it doesn't matter how many times they've been proven wrong. They like the belief and they like the scientific sound to it. So Marx says that the evolution of society scientifically, inevitably, we start off with a farmer society, agrarian society, then we move to an industrial society. Once we have an industrial society, then the proletarians are not peasants, they're not farmers. That's why the Soviet flag has a hammer and a sickle. The hammer is for the proletarians, the sickle's for the peasants. You have to have an industrial economy made up primarily of proletarians who then, because of the horrible conditions in the factories, will rise up and they will take over the means of production. The workers will control the means of production. And once this industrial society is established and the workers rise up against their oppressor, then the workers will run the factory and there'll be nothing but limitless bounty for everybody. That's Marxism. right? That's Marxism. And now Lenin has to figure out a way to make this argument where he's going, which is Russia, which is a country that at the time had 1 million proletarians and 80 million peasants. He talks about the dictatorship of the proletariat. That's his imprimatur. That's his street cred. I'm bringing Marxism to Russia. Well, Marxism says that Russia is the last place in the world where Marxism is going to happen. It's going to happen in Germany. It's going to happen in England, America, someplace with an industrial base. There is no industrial base to speak of in Russia. So Lenin has to spend 2 weeks on this train thinking of a way to use that intellectual prestidigitation and convince people that, through argument that an elephant can hang off a cliff with its tail tied to a daisy. So I maintain that the reason that he murdered so many of these kulaks, the reason he murdered so many peasants and starved 20 million people to death, was because the Russian peasants weren't a danger to the revolution. They were embarrassing to him, because the peasants made Lenin into a heretic. He made this Marxist true believer, this high priest of Marxism, it turned him into a heretic. He had to negate Marx in order to make Marxism fit into Russia. And he knew it, right? He knew it. The fact that he was able to take Russia and make it a communist country is a direct inversion of everything that Marx said. So when he says this is Marxism, he knows it's not. So what does that do? It just fills him with a subconscious rage, especially against the peasants, because they're embarrassing. They're so backwards. They don't have any class consciousness, right? They're simple. They're religious. They're primitive. They're superstitious. They're nothing like the intellectuals that he sat in these cafes in 17 years in Zurich and London and Paris and all the rest of it. So my point is that Marxism was obsolete by the time that Lenin put it in place because, stay with me here, gang, because Marxism was predicted. Yeah, very hipster of him. Exactly right, Air Techie. He's a hipster. Marxism had to come from industrialized countries. United States, Germany was the leading candidate at the time. Germany, France, Britain, United States, essentially one of those. And by the time that Marxism is actually thought about as a theory, we are out of first stage industrial era capitalism. And now capitalism is providing so much benefits for people, their standard of living is rising so fast that there's no reason for them to be communists. They got their own houses now. In America, they have indoor plumbing, and some of them have cars. So the entire impetus for Marxism, this early first 50, 70 years of the Industrial Revolution, right? When you've got kids sticking their fingers in looms, and including my parents, because all of 7 generations of my ancestors worked in textile mills in Lancashire. So you send a 10-year-old guy, who would be my great-great-great-great-grandfather, into a mill, and he gets his finger caught in a machine, and now he's got 4 fingers left. That's my bloodline. And before that, we were coal miners. So all of this to say that Marxism became obsolete because capitalism was producing so much wealth, and by that time, the worst excesses of industrial era capitalism were over. In fact, in the beginning of the industrial era, right, this isn't a mystery, in the beginning of the industrial era, you had to be a capitalist, you had to be a capitalist. In order to play the game, you had to have capital. That's why the capitalist is a big fat guy with a top hat holding 2 big sacks that have dollar bills on them. I have capital, therefore I can play the game and I can get rich. But that was an extremely limited period in history. For instance, today, here I am. I'm running a little business here, right? And it's brought in some money. And I didn't have any capital to start this. I didn't have any capital to start it. None. Zero. So this whole idea of capitalism, which was a Marxist term anyway, this has been obsolete for 200 years. And they're still talking about it. And these lunatics who are writing this stuff for spaceflight are bringing this with them because that's all they understand about stuff that's interesting. That's the only drama that they can think of is class oppression because they're morons, right? They're morons. They are too ignorant of history to know that their science fiction future is impossible. It's impossible. So this is why the colony is going to be a different kind of show, right? It's going to be a different kind of show. The homesteader guy, that main storyline, the one I keep coming back to every time, is a guy who's working as a high-pressure hydro engineer on Earth, and he figures, I can make a living out there. Make a living, you heard me, not survive, make a living. I have something to offer because I can make a living, I think, by drilling down and getting to the ice below the surface and giving individual houses their own water wells. So they don't have to ship it in every 2-3 months. Okay, that's an awful long way away from that, because this guy gets there, he's got no money, his family's got no money. They spent all the money they had on this rover. The rover's missing a wheel. It's the food went bad in it. What are they going to do? They're going to sue the guy that bought the thing 4 light years away. So he and the family are poor, but they're never proletarians. They're never belters, right? They get to work. They get to work. I just don't see it. I don't see how that future that the Expanse portrays is possible. I can, of course, see a world where after the planet has been settled for 200 years, and now you've got millions and millions of people and this enormous tax base and enough money to start paying for things like social welfare programs, then I can see that happening. But you can't be a lazy pioneer. So that's where this kind of science fiction falls apart for me, and where it shouldn't fall apart, and where it won't fall apart, and where, in fact, the entire purpose of the entire series is. This is the purpose of the series. The purpose of the colonies is to show people not only how things actually worked to get us here, but to show us that it'll work again, anywhere you apply it. First time chat from Kentekrat. The broken rover reminds me of Washington ordering carriages from London and then sending him junk because he can't return it. Yes. So, the thing about space that is appealing to me, and appealing on a level of hope for humanity kind of thing, is that you can't be stupid in space. And you can't be stupid on the frontier either. You can be uneducated, you can be relatively simple, but you can't be stupid. Right? You can't be stupid, and you can't be lazy, because danger selects out the stupid and the lazy very, very quickly. So it doesn't mean that space becomes elitist, because elitist means, well, you'd have to go to the right school, or you're the right race, or whatever. No, you just can't be stupid, you can't be lazy. If you can avoid doing those two things, you probably find a perfectly fine place for yourself. Except that this is what you never see. A couple of people have mentioned Star Trek, and especially Next Generation, that they say it's a post-prosperity era. And it is. Once you get a replicator, right, shovel some stuff into it, and it rearranges the molecules. Oh, bravo. The Sacred Order of Knightly Valor. Here's the punchline. I really am serious. Honest to God, I'm damn near tempted to steal this. I love it so much. The colonies, and then the subtitle is, in space, no one can hear you whine. Brilliant. In space, no one can hear you whine. Perfect. So, anyway, this is what I find encouraging about it. Infidel 42 says, like I said earlier, space is hard. It would weed out the weak and the unfit. Yes. And it doesn't, by the way, when you say weed them out, it does it in the best possible way, because we're not talking about genocide. Nobody, I am 100%, I spent my entire career fighting against collectivism because of the murdering that it does. When you say it weeds, and you're right, when you say, but space weeds out the weak and the unfit, it doesn't do that by going through the population and shooting the weak and the unfit. It just makes it a place where they don't want to go, or they're not allowed to go because they can't get there. Right? It doesn't massacre them. It doesn't come in and kill them. It doesn't starve them to death. It just basically says, if you don't have this level of skill, it's not intelligence. It's an attitude. You are going to need the equivalent of janitors in space, but they can't be lazy and they can't be stupid and they can't be because the pool that you're drawing on is so large. So it's really interesting when you get to that level. And that's why I'm so pleased with the mental work that I've done on this homesteader thing. I love the idea that it was, I got locked into this from a 40K story. But I had played with the idea, but the 40K story really locked me into it. Planet with a highly elliptical orbit, so that most of the time it's very, very cold, and then it starts to get warm very quickly. Then it's burning hot for a relative, because orbits work like this. Very fast around the sun, further out you go, the slower, and then it comes in here faster and then slower. So if it's got a 6-year orbit, 5 of those years are cold. 4 or 5 months on either side are livable, pleasant, more pleasant every day. It gets warmer every day. And then at the bottom of the orbit, the perihelion, you get a couple weeks when it's 180 degrees, 160 degrees outside. So one of the first things that I like about that was I decided to bring this family, because this is who we're following. So when I say we bring the family, the audience arrives on this planet not at the perfectly timed, what great luck, what an incredible coincidence that you manage to arrive just as things are getting pleasant. No, they arrive at the worst possible time. They don't arrive at peak coldness. They arrive at the time that the planet is starting to get cold. They got 4 years of cold ahead of them, and it is the worst possible time. Thank you for that, Eric. So, yeah, Gates may realize it's an effective way to reduce the carbon he doesn't like. I have a certain number of lines in my head. I have dozens of scenes pretty much written in my head, but I have one line that I just love. This guy in the homesteading story. He's a father. He's got a wife. She's a musician. I wanted something that was non-essential for the wife because I didn't want them to both be engineers, because I think there'd be a lot of that. She's not a musician, not just a musician. She's a music teacher. That's what his wife does. Okay. There could be some use for that. But she works her tail off, and so does the son, and eventually so does the daughter, even though she's 15 and she's been pulled out of the nightclub scene and all of her friends, where she would have ended up being a drug addict. But my favorite line on this guy basically is going around to these individual habitats, single family homes, or maybe a small little village, and saying to them, right now, you're paying for water. The water rover comes in once every 3 months. You're recycling about everything, right? You're recycling most of everything, but you still have to conserve water hard, and you still have to pay for it, right? Well, there's permafrost down there, and I can put in a well for you, and it'll cost you this amount of money, and I'll take payments. That's his business model. So this one line, I just love this line. He finally, he's convinced to drive, 5 days or something in his rover to go meet this guy who's got a little tiny little habitat, right, in a little cove. And our guy already knows basic geology about the place. He says, yeah, there's almost certainly water down there, and probably not too deep. So the guy says, all right, come on out and we'll talk business. So he drives out there for 4 or 5 days in his nuclear-powered rover. And he gets there, and he starts talking to this guy. We'll call him Farmer Joe for the sake of it. And he basically says, all right, so our guy says, so what kind of energy source have we got here? What can we work with? And the guy says, well, we got solar panels on both sides of this hill, and we've got 3 wind turbines up there. And then my guy says, look, when you're ready to stop dicking around, call me again, okay? This is ridiculous. In order to pull this off, you need a real simple, relatively inexpensive, you can get a used one with still got 14 years on it or something like that. You need a simple 5 megawatt reactor. It's the size of a barrel of oil. And when you're serious, let me know, because we can't run anything on this. This is a joke. It's a cartoon. I don't get to say anything about global warming, but I do get to talk about exactly how much power wind and solar deliver compared to nuclear reactor. And when I have this guy looking up at the windows, like, when you just, and I don't say when you decide to get serious. I say, when you decide to stop dicking around, then we'll talk some business. I can include the reactor in the proposal price. It's not the most important part of the thing because there'd be so many of them. It'd be like widescreen TVs. Like, I've got this 65-inch monitor here because this is where I work. This is huge monitor. It's 4K, so it's got the resolution. And when these things first came out, they're $7,000, $8,000. I didn't buy it at that price point. I bought it probably around $1,800. Now they're $400. They're for a 1080 widescreen. They're less than that. So if you need reactors, and when I say reactors, I mean you need reliable energy, lots of it, independent of a grid, because you're going out into the wilderness. You need a suitcase reactor. Well, a barrel anyway. So there'll be thousands, millions of them. They're just simple fission reactors. It's real easy. They just put some uranium in there or thorium. They make sure that there's not enough in there for critical mass, but it gets the water hot, powers a turbine. Here's your megawatts of power. It's making 5 megawatts of power whether you're using it or not. So you might as well air condition the whole outdoors because you can, right? And then this guy's saying, now we put a well down here. You've got this enormous frozen underground aquifer. We put the heating elements into it, obviously. You can water your lawn even though there's no lawn. You can do whatever you want to, man. This is the message that I'm trying to sell. This is what the colonies is all about, right? Is that there is no restrictions on human behavior that don't come down to political control from other people who don't like to see you off on your own. That's all there is to it. Okay. We could have had these reactors forever. Please consider posting your audio to Spotify. All right, I will. I don't know much about Spotify, actually. 1968 Camaro SS. That guy gets my attention. Till very recently, used windmill blades were simply buried after they were no longer usable. Pretty green, huh? Yeah. Yeah, and all the amount of money and time to build them and then ship them in from China and all the rest of it. The entire point of this particular thread is that the homesteading thread is about leaving Los Angeles, which is Mike is hot, thanks, which is a sewer. It's just sewer. It's a burned down, corrupt, socialized system of proles. And they're only proles because they're voting machines, and they allow it. So this is a story about if you get away from other people telling you what to do, there's no limit to what you can do. You're going to go out there to this little frickin' inlet in the middle of these frozen mountains, and you're going to say to this guy, I still have to figure out what Farmer Joe does for a living. He does something, maybe he's a prospector or something like that. You can say to this guy, listen, man, you don't have to live like a savage here. You can get there. I'll put in the reactor, put in the pumps. You're good to go. And parenthetically, Farmer Joe does this, and then Farmer Joe, through no fault of his own, suddenly doesn't have any income, and that means that our family is on the hook because they laid out this cash in advance and they were taking payments, and now this guy can't make the payments. That's an interesting problem, right? It's an interesting problem. So anyway, that's a colonies question. I'm about to go to BillWhittle.com. Anybody else in the comment section got anything that grabbed my interest the way that did there real quick? Hello? Anyway, Bueller? Anybody? My gold for. I'm cleaning up my gold from prospecting in the afternoon. Yes, exactly right. You said I would start the Q&A on Facebook. I did say that, didn't I? All right. I'll go to Facebook, by golly. Hey, crikey. $20 Australian. Crikey. Thank you. Good on you. Appreciate it. celebrate the first super chat from Crikey. Well, Crikey, thank you. $20 Australian. I spent 6.5, 7 months in Brisbane, and I loved it. Loved it. I thought the Australians were really cool. I thought going into it, I thought, man, I'm going to love the women. They're going to be really cool, and the guys are probably going to be a little rough. Exactly backwards. I found the women to be a little snooty, but the guys were just the best guys in the world. It's just like they're just the most fun, open, cool guys, you know. Yeah, gonna grab a boat. We're going to go out to that island. We're going to cook some T-bone steaks and drink some beer. You want to go? Yeah, I do, actually. That sounds pretty good. All right, so what did I put my glasses on for? Oh, yes, so I said I would do Facebook, so let's do Facebook. Now there's has anybody, what happened to Marusha? Anybody know? Haven't seen her in 3-4 weeks. Let's have a look. If she's watching, you are sorely missed. Okay, 9 comments. Come on. Oh, you bastard. All right, hang on a second. Let me peel this off so I can see if anybody's answering what happened to Marusha, who's just a huge part of the show, and I'm really a little concerned. I haven't seen her in a while. Oh, she's working on game design. Okay. Well, I'll try to get to all of that. Anyway, it's weird and sort of bleak not seeing her here in the comment section. Caleb Belchek says, "Hey, Bill, did I receive your letter?" I don't think I did, Caleb. Was it an email or a mail letter? We usually check snail mail once a week. And I didn't get a chance to talk to our office manager today, so she'll be in tomorrow morning. So will I. So hopefully it's in there then. So here we go. We're looking at the comment section here and try and keep all these windows open. And yeah, all right, here we go. Okay. Kent Nebergall. Sorry, Kent. Hi, Bill. Hey, Kent. I remember a software program used for creating Independence Day that used formulaic save the cat beats and prompted the user to mimic that style. I think it worked okay for that film, but failed spectacularly with NYC Godzilla and Day After Tomorrow films by the same writers. With ChatGPT being both automated and very woke of late, will screenwriting become even lazier and more formulaic? I'm reminded of the Osimo episode of South Park for real. I loved Osimo. I loved it. I love Cartman. I love him. I just love him. I think he's one of the greatest characters on TV ever. So this is a great question, great kind of question, especially for this show. So the question is, will computers ever take over writing? Or acting, or anything like that? Will artificial intelligence ever take over? Now, believe it or not, I kind of figured this one out when I was in college. So last year in college, 81, 82, something like that. We had a theater department, and there were a number of professors there, but there was only one guy who really knew what he was doing, and that guy's name was David Shelton. And he had suffered from polio as a kid, so he had quite a limp, and he was a real tough guy to get to know, had a lot of Simon Cowell about him, just like I mentioned earlier with Kenneth Samuels. And he was the only person in the department that everybody respected because, number one, he didn't blow sunshine at us. He was merciless. I did a scene in front of him, and after the scene was over, you stand up there and you wait for your notes. And I was waiting for my notes on this scene. He just looked at me I was up there with some other persons, and he just looked at me for a while and just said, just sit down. Just sit down, okay? Did you get an A? No. So, for some reason or another, this, I think, was probably the very, very beginning of, it wasn't artificial intelligence, obviously, because 81, 82. but it was the beginning, I think, of this experimental thing where the audience got to vote on what would happen at, I don't know, let's say 8 or 10 points throughout the story. Did it get to this? And then the film stops and it's like, should John kiss the girl, walk away, boom, and everybody would vote on it, right? And then that's how you would see the movie. So there's any number of different combinations of this movie. And that brought up the idea of computer-generated actors and computer-generated writers, which are still a long, long way away back then. And he was convinced that that's the future of entertainment, that people will tell a story that they want to see, and you won't need writers anymore. And I said, Dr. Shelton, I didn't get to call him David until 10 years after that. I said, Dr. Shelton, here's the thing, though, right? Yes, everybody's going to pick the outcome that they want, and that is really shitty writing. What? See, I was a writer. Virtually everybody else in the theater department, there were actors, but I was there as a writer. And I said, I mean, think about it. The reason you get involved and attached to a character is because of their faults and because of the hardships that they go through. And if you've got a character that everybody sympathizes with, nobody's going to vote him into something bad. Everybody's going to want to. Everybody will be a Mary Sue. The term didn't exist back then, but that's what it basically meant. Everybody will write the story that they want to see, and a writer writes the story that they should see. Notice I didn't say gives them the lesson that they need to learn. I said writes the story that they should see. The writer writes the best story. The writer has to have the discipline to put warts on his heroes and to put the people he loves into not only dangerous situations, that's a little tough, but putting them into morally debatable situations where you've got your hero and he's doing something that's a little bit dicey, a little bit sketchy. That's how you create an interesting character. Just talking about Cartman a second ago. Cartman's a one-dimensional. He is literally a one-dimensional character. At least he was in the original, right? Before they did computer animation trying to look like the paper cutouts. But Cartman's a one-dimensional character, but he's a one-dimensional character who works because he's saying the things that no one else is allowed to say. Nobody could ever get away with what Cartman says in a live-action show. So the writers know that they can put things into Cartman's mouth that are reprehensible things, including taking your rival and dicing his parents up into stew and chili or something and making him eat them. He can go as far as he wants to with that because that's his brand. That's what he is. So there's no dimension there, but he is an outlet for a kind of morality that is not attractive, and the writers have the sense to make sure that he gets punished about as often as he gets rewarded, and they also have the sense to make sure he gets rewarded about as often as he gets punished. So Cartman is everybody's id, right? Cartman is what everybody wants to do. Yeah, that's right. G Sizzy there in there, Sizzle. He's when we meet our own Scott Tenorman, we want to go all full Cartman on him. So the argument that you're saying here with automated, chat bots and will they write screenplays? They certainly can write screenplays, and they will certainly be able to write screenplays that have all the elements of movies. But I'd be astonished if they could write when you're writing a screenplay, you have to do a strange combination of things. If you think that you can break all the rules, then you're just going to fail. And I failed plenty of times with the 350-page screenplays when they're supposed to be 120 pages, that kind of thing. Oh, this is different because this is so wonderful. It's just bloated, Bill. So you got to stick to the formula because that's what works. It's not like it was imposed on somebody. It's not like this is how you must write a screenplay. It's like you write a 3-act screenplay. with plot points at page 30, page 90, and a, act one ends at 30, act two ends at page 90, and movie ends at 120. So it will be able to do that, and it will be able to do the kind of things that I've heard this GPT thing. I think, isn't this the thing that you asked it to write a poem about, about me or Scott Ott or whatever, and it searches the internet and it finds, enough and puts together something. Yes, it's interesting, but it's not artistic. I have yet to see anything out of AI that has shown creative spark. I've seen AI, and I mean the best AI, and I mean in the last 6 months, I've seen the best AI talking to people, and it sounds like a conversation as long as you don't push the limits of a normal conversation. And if you did, I'm convinced it would simply just plain go full Norman coordinate on you. Just the smoke would start coming out of its ears. Real quick, SM says, hey, Bill, what do you think of South Park conservatives, i.e. kids who grew up on South Park and have developed the writer's ideas on making fun of and being able to criticize everything, even yourself? See, this is why Cartman is so important, and why he's so popular, because he gives people social proof, not so much to say the things that he says, but it makes it okay for people to think some of the things that he thinks. Like, no, I don't think I certainly don't want kids to become Cartmans, but I really like the idea that Cartman can say things that are forbidden because nothing should be forbidden. He gets to just come out and say it, and that gives social proof to these kids who've been told that you can't say anything to offend anybody anywhere ever. That's a terrible way to live, and it's very frustrating. And I think that young people see this, the so-called Cartman conservatives see this, and they think, oh, okay. So it's okay to say something that appears to be true, even if it's not politically correct. Like the PC principle, that was brilliant, right? You get this guy who is the antithesis of what you would think of it. And that's just genius. It's just Matt and Trey's genius. You got this super amped up muscular guy who's like this complete woke pansy. And so he's spouting off about this stuff. And, Austin Ripley says everybody hates Cartman. Everybody in the show hates Cartman. All of the people around Cartman who are inside the frame hate Cartman, but outside of the frame, everybody loves Cartman. They love him, I think, the same way that they used to love Homer Simpson. I don't think anybody ever loved Bart Simpson, but Homer, before, when the show was funny, before it went on life support 25 years ago, Homer was loved because he was stupid and hysterical, but he loved his family. He was a good guy. He's a good guy. And they made him into a cartoon. Archie Bunker, Road Rider, classic example. Archie Bunker was the antithesis of Norman Lear. He was the guy who would say, Norman Lear was one of these red diaper babies who used Archie Bunker to say all the things he thought were horrible. And some of the stuff Archie said was a little horrible, but this blew up in Norman Lear's face because everybody who watched the show loved Archie Bunker, and nobody loved Mike Stivic. Mike Stivic was the voice of Norman Lear. When Mike Stivic speaks, that's Norman Lear speaking. When Archie Bunker speaks, if I remember correctly, that's Norman Lear's dad, who he particularly didn't get around to. I have to stop for a second because there's a name that's come up in the comment section. I must leap on this story. Sad Wings Raging says, I miss Mr. Green Jeans. Well, Sad Wings, I have a Mr. Green Jeans story for you. And we're just going to abandon everything. Although Steve Whoop, I'll come back to this. Stewie is the exact same thing as Cartman. Stewie is our id unleashed, and the more repressive the world gets, the more we like Stewie and Cartman. I want to come back to Meathead in a minute, but I can't forget this because if I forget this, I'll never forgive myself. So Sad Wings Raging says, I miss Mr. Green Jeans. So, for those of you who are not old enough, Mr. Green Jeans was on Captain Kangaroo. He was Captain Kangaroo's If Captain Kangaroo was Batman, then Mr. Green Jeans was Robin. And he was just a real nice guy. And now you'll probably have a hard time trying to figure out what the defining characteristic of Mr. Green Jeans was, but as it turns out, he was a guy who wore green jeans, coveralls. So that was Mr. Green Jeans. And when I grew up in Bermuda in the mid 60s, I got there in 63, left in 72. So this was a point when the island of Bermuda was pretty much the place to go. For all the New York elites, there was no Cancun or Cozumel or, Caymans, nothing. It was Bermuda. You just get on a jet and go. Unleashed is exactly what I mean. It says Jake Coulter says it sounds like Forbidden Planet. Exactly. Cartman is the id beast run wild, and we love watching it. So anyway, we are sitting there as kids, and a number of people who would at the time counted as minor celebrities would come up, because my dad, being the hotel manager, would have a cocktail party at the house probably once a week or once every 10 days or something, to bring in, just to say hi to the special guests, right? To the whales, the big spenders. And we used to have to serve hors d'oeuvres at those things. Evan was too young, but Steve and I would dressed up in our little red blazers with a little, plaid shorts and our knee socks and our little bow ties, and we'd go around and have plates of hors d'oeuvres for people. So there were people there like Enzo Stuardi, who most of you have never even heard of. He was an Italian singer, kind of a dollar store kind of Dean Martin, and a number of other people in that general category. Just people whose names I can barely remember, but they would come up to the house, and somebody would say, I have no idea who this is. Well, Steve and I are there one day, and it's the night of my dad's cocktail party, and Dad says to us, "Hey, you're gonna like one of the people who's coming up tonight." And we said, "Who's that?" He said, "Mr. Green Jeans is coming tonight to the house." And we lost our freaking minds. This is somebody we watched on TV all the time, right? He was a celebrity. We knew who he was. We didn't know who any of these other people were. Mr. Green Jeans, that's a big deal. So we're getting ready for this thing, and people coming in through the front door, and then the back doors where you can park your car and stuff. And so my brother Steve and I are all dressed up, and we're just completely amped about this. And people are coming in, and then there's a knock on the back door. People coming in, we go answering the doors. And somewhere in the course of this early evening, there's a knock on a door, and the door opens, and Steve was so excited about this that Steve said, "Guess who's going to be at the party tonight?" And this guy says, "Who?" And Steve says, "Mr. Green Jeans is going to be here." And this guy says, "I am Mr. Green Jeans." But he wasn't wearing his green jeans. And then we looked at him, we realized, oh crap. And Steve ran away. He was just so freaked out. He just took off. I didn't recognize him without the green jeans until he said he's Mr. Green Jeans, and I looked at his face like, well, that is actually Mr. Green Jeans. Anyway, that's my Mr. Green Jeans story, and he was one of the nicest people I could ever meet. I remember him standing there. I remember his face. I remember the the bottles of soda that we had stacked outside, the wooden bottles in a wooden box with the cross hatching, and I just remember Mr. Green Jeans just being a very kind face, and when he saw that reaction, he was just warm, I'm Mr. Green Jeans. Oh my God. And you are? I'm Billy, Mr. Green Jeans. Good to meet you. Good to meet you, Bill. Thank you, Mr. Green Jeans. Or should I just call you Green? Crate, yeah, crate, thanks. Wooden crate, little soda crate. Anyway, so there we go. So we're back to, I think we pretty much got the whole South Park thing and the screenwriting thing and all the rest of it. Awesome, was great. Who was the character? It was voiced by the same guy who does Cartman. I don't know whether it was Trey or Matt does Cartman. But who was the character at the summer camp who would always go, Mimsy! Mimsy! He's like a super Cartman, tyrant kind of guy. Mimsy. I need to look that up afterwards. That made me cry. I was laughing so hard. I think he appeared in like a couple episodes. Just a little. He was like a little, almost like a Stewie. He was like this kind of a genius, but at the same time, he's got like Lex Luthor in the original Superman movies. He's super genius surrounded by idiots. Trade as Cartman doesn't surprise me. Nathan. Yep. Okay. Lake Tartacaca, is it? That's fantastic. All right, so we'll go on down to Facebook again, and we'll see what we get next year. Steve Young. Hey, Steve, good to see you. TV is full of male-bashing commercials, especially from insurance companies and Domino's Pizza. It's understandable from Disney, but is there really a positive return on production to corporate America from insulting their customers? Well, no, but that doesn't stop them. Why does Gillette say, we all need to be better men? We've got to stop this rape culture. We as men who use Gillette razors need to understand that we're part of the Me Too movement. We need to stop this rape culture because all males are toxic, and it might as well be you or your kids. You better stop them right now. That's not a smart thing for Gillette to say, but they said it, and they lost 40% of their market share, something overnight, like that. People do stupid things, and the more isolated they are, the more stupid they can be. You would never have anybody who is stocking Gillette razors or whatever make that decision. But executives can make a decision that's stupid because they just talk to other executives. And they are told by their liberal friends on the golf courses that this is what we all do. None of them believe in it. Let me rephrase that. None of them like it. But they all seem to think that it's necessary. Well, they did, because woke is crashing so hard now that it's actually, we're well past peak woke. But they were told that this is the future. Take Star Trek, for example, right? So when I can't even say the words Star Trek, which is one word, and then we'll put a pause there, which is another sentence. And now that they're separated by two sentences, we can say the next word, which is discovery. As long as we don't say them in the same sentence, I can do it without throwing up. But STD is nothing like Star Trek. It's the antithesis of Star Trek. It's dark. It's gloomy. It's female. It's meta. It's ironic. It's unserious. It mocks its own content as well as its own audience. It's the antithesis of what Star Trek is. So why did they make it? Well, somebody told the big brains at Paramount that there is a young audience there, and the young audience likes these things. So that's what you have to do to Star Trek. You have to make Star Trek into anti-Star Trek, because that's what those crazy nutty kids are going to want to see today. But there's no binary. It's not like there's a switch between the people my age who like Star Trek and some 8-year-old kid who likes Star Trek. It's just plain stupid. Now, certain Picard is worse. Yes, it is. However, these executives want to believe this because it makes them look good at cocktail parties, right? And that's all that matters. These people are making a ton of money. They make a ton of money whether the company does well or not well. So they'd rather look good at a cocktail party than put out good content. And by the way, they're just too lazy, and mostly they're too incompetent to produce anything good. So we'll just take we'll take an existing title and we'll run with it. I posted Steve Green's Right Angle just last night. There's a show out now on Paramount Plus, I think, called Rise of the Pink Ladies. It's a Grease spinoff. 1954. 2-3 years before Rydell, before the actions in Greece. And you have your sort of binary, is it a boy, is it a girl, trans kind of thing, and you got girls kissing this kind of thing, and it's supposed to be 1954, and it's just plain garbage. And I also posted on there a reunion thing that John Travolta did with Olivia Newton-John. I was about 10 years old at the time. But he just comes up on stage and they just sing "You're the One That I Want." And they're having so much fun. And that's what I went off about. It's like, there is no fun for these people. These entire generation, 2 generations now, have been raised to be just mirthless attack bots. That's all they are. I must seek out injustice. Well, there is no injustice. Well, we'll find some, don't you worry, you know. Well, there's nobody being nailed to trees here, so I guess we'll have to say somebody said something mean to me, or maybe they didn't use my right pronoun, and we're going to use that at the same level of outrage as genuine injustice. So there they go. Sacred Order of Knightly Valor with the super chat says the woke executive agenda is destroy the capitalist company from within and get rich doing it. Yes, they want. Look, the you're talking about why would they put male bashing commercials on Domino's Pizza and all the rest of it? It's because there's no consequences for them. They are going to get their golden parachute. They don't care if they destroy the brand. They don't care, right? They want to look good at the cocktail parties now. They've got tons of money. They're never going to have to worry about that again. So what they want is they want to look good with it's all Emperor's New Clothes. They're all trying to virtue signal each other with the same virtue signal, and none of them really want it or believe it. I want to talk for a minute about meta, at least as I understand the term. Not the catastrophic failure that is Zuckerberg's wet dream of everybody living in the computer world just like he does. I want to talk about this idea of meta. And I see it everywhere. And what did I just recently see it in? Something that wasn't too awful, actually. Hang on. So meta is when let's say you've got a horror movie, right? And it's supposed to be a serious horror movie. And you got the teenagers in the cabin, right? And the bad guys out there, and somebody throws an axe or something, right? And it hits this guy in the head and splits his head in two or something. And then somebody says, boy, I bet he didn't see that coming, right? That's meta. That's commenting on the material. That's the writer saying, I don't believe in the material. I don't believe in it. I'm too sophisticated to write an actual horror story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to constantly have these little statements that don't make any sense, and I'm going to put them in there. And Discovery is a gold mine of these things. Like they're about to engage the warp drive, and one of them says, "Science is so cool." I've been a pilot for quite a while, and I've sat in a number of cockpits and I've listened to the radio, and I've never once heard pilots put the throttles forward and go, "Engineering is so cool." That's just plain meta. That's the writer speaking. That's the writer injecting the writer's own irony into the story. And they do it all the time. All the time. All the time. They're constantly nudging the audience, saying, we're too sophisticated to really believe this Star Trek stuff. I mean, this is for children, right? We're far too intelligent and advanced and morally superior to actually believe any of this stuff. So we'll just comment on it. This character will be me, and I'll pretend I'm going along, and then I'll say something like, "I'll be back. Thank you, you idiot." They're just plain G.K. Masterson for the win. Deadpool is the only good meta. And the reason that Deadpool works is because the character takes it seriously. This is something fun to talk about. I learned this from Jack Horkheimer. It wasn't about meta. It was about camp. We did a show called... We wanted to do a show, but well, it was before I got there, so I just saw it when it was rerun, and I practiced it at night. So Mariner 9 had gone to Mars and had gone into orbit around Mars, the first probe to orbit Mars, and got there, and there was did it orbit Mars? I kind of think it did. Anyway, I know Mariner 9 got us the first really decent pictures of Mars up close. So Horkheimer wanted to do a show about Mars. So he wrote a script called Buck Rogers Right On. And basically what he was doing is he was contrasting the Mars that existed in the 1930s with what we know about Mars today. That's why Horkheimer was a genius. And that's why I grew up listening to Alan's Alley and other radio classics like Ethel Merman singing God Bless America, because all of the walk-in music was like old radio shows and that kind of thing. So Horkheimer said this back then. So the whole thing is it's all meta, right? We got a guy reading from the strip, reading the actual words from the strip. And one of those words is, hang on, sister, it's death to drop. He's flying around in his little jetpack and Wilma Deering's holding on to him. Thank you very much for that. The Boomer Dude, first time chat. Mariner 9, first spacecraft to orbit another planet. All I remember about Mariner, the reason I was momentarily confused was because thinking about Mariner 9 was when Mariner 9 went into orbit, there was a planet-wide dust storm. You couldn't see anything. It was just haze. And some guy said, well, since we're here, why don't we take a picture of Phobos? And that guy was Carl Sagan and got us the first picture of an asteroid. Okay, so it's true for meta, it's true for camp. And what Jack said was, he said, the only way that something ridiculous, let's take Batman. Everybody knows Batman is a perfect example, the TV show. The only way that Batman works, and Batman is bloody brilliant. It's just brilliant. And the reason Batman works is because Adam West believes it. Right? He believes it. Adam West isn't standing there in the corner nudging the audience about how ridiculous this whole Batman thing is. If he did that, it'd be a catastrophe. Camp, Batman is camp. Camp, in order for camp to work, it has to be played absolutely seriously. Because if you start commenting on something that is already a commentary on something, it's just garbage. It's unwatchable cringe. The genius of Batman, and Burt Ward too, all of them, but really Adam West and Burt Ward. The genius of that show, the reason that show was a society-changing smash hit, was because Adam West and Burt Ward took it seriously. They took it seriously. They genuinely, actually took it seriously. And that's why it worked. Because otherwise, none of the stuff that makes Batman brilliant makes any sense. I'll give you my favorite example from Batman. By far, Batman and Robin are looking for some bad guys, and they go into a nightclub, and it's packed. And everybody's in evening clothes, and Batman and Robin come in their costumes, and the maitre d' walks up to him and he says, would you like a stage side table for you, Batman, right up front? And Batman says, no, we wouldn't want to call undue attention to ourselves. Says the guy in the pink and purple batsuit. We wouldn't want to call undue attention to ourselves. That's brilliant. That's really, really, really clever. And if he had made any kind of comment on that, it would have been a catastrophe. It wouldn't have made any sense. But the fact that he said that in such a straight, the fact that he played it so straight is what made it funny. No. We don't want to call any undue attention to ourselves. Because we're dressed in our frickin' costumes, right? It's clever. Little things on Batman that were really clever, just clever. So the narrator is constantly referring to Stately Wayne Manor. Batman and Robin return to Stately Wayne Manor. It's always referred to as Stately Wayne Manor. And that's funny, but what's brilliant is there was a scene where there was they went to the Bat computer and Bruce Wayne's house came up, and on the screen, on the picture, the subtitle of the house said Stately Wayne Manor. And I thought, that is absolutely it, man. Absolutely it. So as Eric points out, the reason that Batman works and the reason that Deadpool works is that they don't comment on the camp. They just believe it, and they make it part of the character. Sometimes you just can't get rid of a bomb. Absolutely right. And I'll tell you another thing. When I remember, I was crazed about that show. It was years before I saw Star Trek. It was a battle of one hemisphere versus the other for me with Lost in Space and Batman. Both came out in '66, I want to say. And I used to have a bat costume and a bat cowl, and I would come home from school and I'd get in my bat costume and I'd go stand at the end of our driveway with my hands on my hips protecting, Bermuda. That's what Batman did. And people would beep their horns and say, "Good to see you, Batman." And I'd say, "Carry on, citizen," that kind of thing. But I took it seriously because I was too much of a child to see what they were really doing. But I bring this up to say that when they are walking up the side of the building and they're holding onto this thin little rope and they're walking straight up the side of the building, and then the windows open and it's some kind of celebrity sticks his head out, right? I believe that. When you see it as an adult, it is so obviously just the camera cranked 90. They're standing on a thing and they're just holding this wire, and there's a wire making their cape stand up so it looks like gravity, and then a guy comes out, instead of from the side, he comes up from the bottom, and oh look, he's Roddy McDowell or whoever the hell it is, right? I believed it when I was a kid because Adam West wasn't constantly winking at the camera saying, "It's just a camera trick." Nope. He didn't take it that way at all. So that's a great example of how you have to play by the rules. And anytime there's any kind of a meta comment like in Discovery, it's just another chance for me to come out of the show and say, okay, so you don't take this seriously. You're embarrassed. It's really what it comes down to. The writers of Discovery and Picard are embarrassed about Star Trek. They find the entire idea to be embarrassing. So they stand aside and make their meta comments to show what the writers really feel. And that's why it's garbage, hot garbage. Ren Soon, I think, mentions one of my favorite actors of all time. That's Frank Gorshin. Second best next to John Glover in the animated series, I guess. I didn't listen. I never saw the animated series, but Frank Gorshin's Riddler is so over the top, but he never ever breaks character I believed him. And Gorshin's TV Riddler was turned up to 12. Right? Now, as an interesting example of something, Astronerd says, like the J. Thomas story on the Lone Ranger. Exactly. This is kind of an interesting point. So Batman did camp and it worked. Deadpool does it and it worked. Some of the other examples we've mentioned worked. And one place where it didn't work, in my opinion, was Dr. Smith. Because I could see Jonathan Harris playing Dr. Smith. I could see Jonathan Harris wringing everything there was to wring out of Dr. Smith. Now, for those of you who are Lost in Space fans, the first season, black and white season, was actually pretty decent science fiction adventure. And Dr. Smith was a bad guy. And the story is very famous. Jonathan Harris, who's a character, Jonathan Harris's narcissism and vanity, and I have affection for Jonathan Harris. I don't want to be taken the wrong way. I hated Dr. Smith when I was a kid, and now I can kind of see where he was going with it. But the true story behind Dr. Smith being Dr. Smith is, oh, the pain, yes, exactly, Renzo. Oh, the pain, oh, my back, my delicate back. Jonathan Harris saw the script. He knew that he was going to be written out of the script pretty soon, that he was going to be good for 5 or 6 episodes of the first season, and then they were going to ditch him because it was a one-dimensional evil guy. You look at him in the pilot, he's just a completely evil guy. And so out of sheer narcissistic survival instinct that an actor has, he basically started adding stuff to Dr. Smith to make him more interesting so that he wouldn't get canned. And I didn't know until a couple of years ago. I could never understand why Lost in Space, in my opinion, ruined itself because of the Dr. Smith, Will Robinson robot trio. I could never, because I hated him when I was a kid watching it. Hated him. I could never understand why they did it. And it turns out that the reason that the last two seasons of Lost in Space looked different than the first season of Lost in Space was because Batman was so successful. Batman was so crazy successful with the camp that Irwin Allen decided to add camp into Lost in Space. But those two things don't mix. Batman was camp, designed from the ground up to be camp. Lost in Space was designed to be a serious show. And you had serious actors playing serious roles. So all of a sudden you got Guy Williams and June Lockhart, and they make one appearance and say one line. Be careful out there, Will. And that's all they have in the episode, right? I mean, Guy Williams in the first season, he's a tremendous protagonist. Really great here. And Don West, I love Don West. I thought Don West was the bomb. Yeah, this guy's like, he looks like a pilot, acts like a pilot, doesn't take any crap off of this lunatic, Dr. Smith. But there's something about Jonathan Harris's performance as Dr. Smith that was too much. And I could see him acting. We run, if you're watching this on the recording, in fact, if you're watching this anywhere other than Twitch, if you're watching it live on YouTube or if you're seeing it on YouTube, we run for the show as a walk-in on Twitch. We run a collection of the shows that I saw, the opening of the shows that I saw when I was a kid. And both versions of Lost in Space are on there. The first season and second season theme songs were one thing, and then they rewrote them for the third season. Third season says, we need to rebrand this thing, need to punch it up. So they went back to the original guy who wrote the first version of the theme song to punch up the second version. And they're both utterly fantastic. And that kid who wrote both of them was named Johnny Williams. John Williams, that guy. But in the little cameo window on the opening credits for the third season of Lost in Space, Jonathan Harris, it's like, settle down, settle down. I didn't believe him the way I believed Adam West. Maybe it has to do with the fact that Batman was a sympathetic character, and I mean, even as a small child, I was probably 7, I guess, when I first saw Lost in Space. I was thinking, why don't they just leave him here? Why don't you just throw him in the pit? He's tried to kill all of you 15 times this season. Why don't you just plain put a hole in his head? I don't know. Yeah, it might have been an accident there. I remember when I was talking about being hypnotized by pop culture during speaking events back in the day when I did a lot of them for Tea Party events. I would say that, you've been hypnotized, and I would ask people I'd say, finish the sentence, look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, and then we go. I'd say, look up in the sky, and everybody else would say, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's a Superman. And I said, and then for kids that are older, you had Gilligan's Island, so just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip. And then the audience would say, that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship. And I said, by the way, the lesson of Gilligan's Island is you can get off the island in half an hour. All you have to do is kill Gilligan. That's all it takes, really, honestly. But Dr. Smith was, maybe he was just too queenie. Maybe it was that, Maybe he was just too gay. Who he wasn't in real life, by the way, to my amazement. At least he was married. It doesn't mean he wasn't gay, and especially in those days. But it was too much. He shattered my willing suspension of disbelief in a way that I didn't for Adam West and Batman. So there we go. All right, we're going to move on here. I'm going to save some more questions. Caleb, I did not get your mail, but I'll be looking for it. Bruce Boxer. Hi, Bruce. We are in a magnetic reversal here on Earth right now. YouTube suspicious observers and the 12,000-year cycle. I don't quite get the YouTube suspicious observers, but I do get the 12,000-year cycle. So the Earth is protected by a magnetic field that keeps all of the ionized. Ionized means it's got a, among other things, means it's got a polarity. Something's ionized, magnets affect it. Yes, exactly right. He was too queer. He was too much. He looked like a queer and acted like a queer, and he's Bunny's married. Oh God. Anyway, so the reason that we have a magnetic field around the Earth is because we have a spinning hunk of iron at the center of the Earth. The Earth's core is magnetic because the center of the Earth is pretty much pure iron, and it's in motion. It's just a giant rotating ball of iron. And this generates a magnetic field. Great. And our compasses point north, or they point south. It doesn't matter. We're going to paint one end of it red, the other end we're going to leave black, and we're going to say the red end points to the north because it's possible to get ferrous metal like iron to align itself with the magnetic field of the Earth. That's what a compass is. But, and this is actually, if you think about it, kind of a lucky break for us. Every 12,000 years or so, that rotating ball in the center of the Earth, it has a kind of a precession, kind of a gyroscopic effect. And then over a relatively brief period of time, it's centuries, I would think, but might be longer than that. That rotating magnetic ball at the center of the Earth essentially just flips over, keeps spinning, it just inverts itself. And that means that now compasses will point to the south. But before that happens, they won't point anywhere. So we are seeing strong indications that we are about to enter one of these magnetic reversal cycles. Strong indications. Suspicious Observers is a YouTube channel. Okay, so the way we know that this is almost certainly going to be what's happening is because the strength of the magnetic field is getting weaker. Let me rephrase that. It's becoming more diffuse. So certainly magnetic north is considerably weaker today than it was when I was a kid, and much weaker than it was 200-300 years ago. The reason I said it's kind of a lucky break was, if this had happened 300-400 years ago, we wouldn't have compasses. That would be the end of ocean exploration for centuries, if not millennia. So basically what's going to happen is the Earth's North Pole will become the South Pole. All of the compasses will point south. You look at north on a compass, it'll be pointing what used to be south. GPS is not affected by this, obviously, but magnetic compasses are. And before that happens, the North Pole will weaken enough so that essentially there will not be a pole. There will be a series of poles. There might be an area somewhere around, let's say, Denver, that's got like a really strong positive field. And then there's another one in Madrid that's kind of a strong, negative field. And it's just kind of blotchy. I don't know what it's going to do to our protection. Something to be worried about. Because it's not just us. I mean, could stay indoors if we had to. But plants and stuff might be a problem. Anyway, it doesn't come on super fast, but it by geological terms, it's just a flash, but it looks like it's happening. So I'm glad the compasses worked when we needed them. We don't really need compasses anymore, basically. Scrappy says big thing about solar radiation, big worry about solar radiation. Yeah, we all of the solar radiation, high energy charged particles that come out of the sun would cook the planet, but they all get hit the magnetic field and they all get channeled into the poles. That's what aurora are. It's just high energy particles hitting the atmosphere and glowing. I will check out that channel because it sounds really cool. I love the name of it, but I'd never heard of him before. All right, moving on here. It's Eric Blake. What do you know? Hail Vectron citizen, whittled by Vectron's golden claw, may our side and Moss be cured of culture war PTSD, and may Vectron pour his golden blessings and anoint thy forehead and the forehead of thy families. Tonight's relatively short question. On Right Angle recently, you guys took issue with studios playing it safe to the point of having multiple viewer-tested endings. Gotta say, isn't that what one would expect with movies written by engineers? Test screenings, what's worked before, etc. Well, it's certainly not written by writers. For those of you not up on this, the woke catastrophe, because it's not just a bad movie or a bomb, and it's not even just a series of bombs. That would be catastrophic enough. It's the destruction of the brand. Disney used to be, if not the most popular brand in America, certainly one of them. It was the most highly respected, best loved brands in America. I was there and I remember all of it. Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Disney, or the Wonderful World of Color, all that. It was a huge effect on me. I went to Disney World before it actually opened to the public because my dad was a hotel manager. And Disney was America. It was everything good about America. In fact, I got a chance to introduce Glenn Beck at an event, and among the many things that Glenn brought with him from his personal museum is a copy of Walt Disney's original prospectus for Disneyland, trying to raise money for Disneyland. And it says this will be a place that celebrates America and American values. That's what Walt was all about. It's been utterly inverted, not just corrupted, inverted. So they have not just made a series of bad movies. They've destroyed the Disney brand. They've destroyed the Star Wars brand. They've destroyed the Star Trek brand. They've destroyed the Ghostbusters brand. Made a somewhat of a recovery, but that 2014 movie is going to take a lot to bury. They're working on Grease now that I mentioned. They're doing a Grease prequel called Rise of the Pink Ladies, which will be about boss girls in 1954 and all the rest of it. And so they've destroyed all of these things. And what you end up with is you hire people. It's one thing to hire woke administrators and woke HR people. But when you hire woke writers, not only do you get, they've destroyed Marvel too, not only do you get bad drama because of the insertion of the lesson that you're going to have beaten into you, but also, Lord of the Rings, yeah, exactly. But also, when you hire these young woke writers, you're hiring people that basically grew up in New York City, did the whole New York City Brentwood kind of thing. They have no life experience at all. None of them have any life experience. Gene Roddenberry was a policeman for a while before he became Gene Roddenberry. And so not only do they add woke garbage to it, Eric, they don't know how to write the stuff that's not woke garbage. They don't. Yeah, that's a great point there. Commander Carter says they're writers that live on Twitter. That's their entire experience. That's how you can have in Discovery the destruction of every single dilithium crystal in the galaxy because some freaky looking alien had a really traumatic experience and screamed real loud, and this emotional wave left this planet and destroyed all of the dilithium in the galaxy. That is the single laziest thing I have ever heard. It takes midichlorians and blows it into second place. I mean, it's 3 orders of magnitude past midichlorians in terms of laziness. We need to do something to really shake up the universe. Really, like what? Well, let's say if we didn't have starships anymore. Great. How would we do that? Well, we got to get rid of dilithium. How about that? Okay. How do we do that? What scientific method do we use to get rid of this scientific structure called dilithium? Oh, we're gonna have a conniption fit. What? Yeah. We're gonna have the kind of conniption fit that radiates through the galaxy and destroys dilithium crystals. What effect does this conniption fit have on biology? You would think that kind of an emotional wave would take people out and burn them. No, not going to touch them. It's just going to touch this rarest, most dense, most important material in the universe. Okay. So that is a person who is not only a woke writer and not only a bad writer, they're a bad, woke, lazy writer. And in space, no one can hear you whine. I just love that. Yeah, and it's not, and that, by the way, everything about Discovery is antithetical not only to Star Trek, it's antithetical to actual progress, and it's antithetical to capitalism. I'll give you a great example. One of the reasons Star Trek became so important to me and everybody else, the millions of people, was because Roddenberry and the writers, really the writers. Roddenberry did an awful lot of the ground work on this. But basically, I've talked about this before. Dilithium crystal is a cool sounding name. Why? Because there is an element called lithium, and there are other elements that are dioxygen, di this or di that, right? It's a combination of two chemical terms to create something that doesn't exist but sounds like it does. Dilithium sounds perfectly. It's just a question of discovering it, right? It's like an isotope of lithium, dilithium crystal. Okay. But he didn't just make it a magic crystal where we all just stand around, hold hands, and look at the crystal, then we go where we want to. No, this was just designed to funnel the matter-antimatter reaction that powered the warp drive that warped space so that the space behind the Enterprise was denser than the space in front of the Enterprise. And that's how the Enterprise could go faster than the speed of light, right? That's actual science. You have to know what you're doing to come up with a warp drive. So when they did Discovery, what did they do? Well, they had, for some reason, they had to have Discovery magically appear and disappear, probably because they were too lazy to write any dialogue that took place on the journey. Most of the great Star Trek stuff happened while the Enterprise is in motion, right? But they didn't know how to write that. They didn't have a clue. Didn't have a clue about how any of this stuff works. And besides, the whole crew is nothing but these chicks anyway. You know, these kind of overweight chicks talking to each other about their feelings, like, you've got this, you know. I never once heard Spock turn to Kirk in the middle of a conflict with the Romulans and have Spock turn to Kirk and say, Jim, you've got this. You can do this, Jim. Of course he could do it. Actually, the only time I ever really had even a flash of not being like the perfect guy to work with on the Cold War series was when I was having trouble. I was hitting the same line on the teleprompter, and I kept tripping over the same line, and I must have flubbed it 7-8 times in a row. And she's like, all right, let's do it again. Just something about the wording just tripped me up. And the makeup person says, come on, Bill, you got this. I know I've got it. Thank you. I don't need to be told I've got it. I know I've got it. I don't need somebody patting me on the back for this. Thank you, but no. But they can't write that. So they had to have the Enterprise, they had to have Discovery move instantaneously. And in order to do that, they decided to invent the spore drive. Really? How does that work? Well, I'll tell you. Real fast from Deef, it's a super chat, says, I call the wokists, as in locusts. They destroy everything they touch. That's rather good. So you've got this, you've got the spore drive. Well, how does this work? Well, does it use science? Is it like dilithium? No, it's not science. So what really drives it? Mostly emotion. Really? Yeah. You put a guy in there and he connects to these spores, see? And then based on his emotional state, not on his level of education, not on his level of intellect, not on engineering, not on stuff that they don't understand, that they don't have to write, it's just the thing that they do know how to write, which is just emotion. And he, through his feelings, not through his work or his engineering or his study or his years of building or standing on the shoulder of giants. No. You feel strongly enough, you'll get there. And that's the spore drive. And it's just plain awful. It's as awful as the dilithium crystals thing. It's just awful. It doesn't make any sense. Well, the whole universe is connected by spores, by fungus. Look, if you want to say that the universe is connected by something invisible, neutrino streams or something, and you can travel those streams, okay, something there, right? Something. It's a bit like gravitational manifolds. But these people have no idea what these things mean. They don't know what neutrinos are. They don't know what manifolds are. They don't know any of this stuff. They just wanted, spore drive. Yeah, it's a fungus. Well, how does that help you? Well, the fungus connects everything to everything. Fungus is its own kingdom. It's not animal or vegetable or mineral. Funguses are unique, but funguses cannot exist in a vacuum. They sure can't spread from one planet to another. What the hell you could have done quantum entanglement. There's any number of things you could have done if you knew anything about science, but they don't. So they just got something lazy and chucked it in there. And Kurtzman nods and does his little beta male thing and says, oh, it sounds great. But the main reason that they picked this method of travel was they specifically wanted to get away from that white male supremacist mansplaining engineering. They wanted to get engineering out of Star Trek. And Jimmy Doohan, who played Scotty, said that the most powerful thing that ever happened to him in his life ever was that the number of people that came up to him and said, I became an engineer because of you, Mr. Doohan. Hundreds of people, hundreds, said that to him, right? So but men go into engineering and women don't. So it can't be about engineering because the show is designed to destroy everything about Star Trek. By the way, have you noticed that on Discovery, it's a real simple thing, but it's real obvious. Have you noticed that the Starfleet Vector, that one, kind of pointy looking, right? Cool. The design on that is perfect, by the way. Perfect. That arc, the way those arcs are perfect. That's geometrically perfect. Well, guess what? On Discovery, they've changed the Starfleet logo. It's no longer pointy. Now it's round. Now it's a nice round oval. It's a nice round oval, and it doesn't have any sharp edges on it, and it's much, much, much more female and much softer and much, much less interesting. Can't really even tell what it is. It's just a giant oval cupcake sitting on your uniform there that doesn't mean anything, doesn't identify as anything. That shape is utterly unique. Lord Bio says, I became a scientist in part because of watching Spock and Data. Yes, exactly. Precisely, yes. Precisely. It inspired people. Well, they know that women aren't going into STEM because most women aren't interested in things. They're interested in people. That's why most nurses, 90% of nurses are women, and 90% of engineers are men. I'm not saying you can't be an engineer if you're a woman or shouldn't be. I'm just saying that's how it breaks out. So, can't have that. We have to re-engineer society. So if we can't get women into STEM, then we'll get the STEM out of Star Trek. We'll just make it an emotional thing. Who controls it? A guy. What's special about him? I actually don't know. I've never seen an episode. I've never seen 5 minutes of an episode. But I do know he's gay. And so when things are really tough and when the Enterprise really, really has to perform, when Discovery really has to perform, like really, really perform, instead of everybody manning their engineering stations, this guy's husband comes in and holds his hand. And that's what allows them to go farther than ever because of the emotional shock that this guy's dealing with as he propels this ship through the universe through his emotions. And thank God he's got his husband there to steady his nerves and to calm him down and all the rest of it. It's just freaking absurd. It's absurd. And no one would watch it. No one would buy it. Nobody is watching it anyway. But they had to put Star Trek on it because no one's going to, they can't write their own stuff, right? This is, I've talked about this many times, but honestly, this Mikey Spock thing, right, as the future ruler of the Earth says, as Doomcock calls her, Mikey Spock, right, the lead character, Space Jesus, she's retconned to be Spock's half-sister or stepsister, right? Never heard of her before, but she grew up with Spock. Thank God she was there to keep Spock on the straight and narrow and to advise him about, science things because she's the smartest person in the world. She's Space Jesus, right? Why did they do that? They did it because they're so lazy. They're so lazy that instead of writing a season or two of this person's growth, they just simply said, "Oh yeah, she's good friends with Spock. She's as important a character as Spock." It's like skinning Spock and putting the cloak on her. It's like it puts its lotion on his skin or else it gets the hose again. That's what it is. It's wearing a skin suit. This character in Discovery is wearing the skin suit of a beloved character, and these idiots think that, well, then if we love Spock and she's Spock's sister, so we'll love her automatically. No, that's not how it works, you morons. It's not, I don't know if Star Trek will ever recover from this. I suspect that it probably will in the fullness of time through fan fiction. But whether it does or doesn't, it is everything that this generation is: dark, cynical, the antithesis of what Star Trek was. Star Trek was optimistic. It was the future that worked. It was hope. All these people, different races and different colors on the bridge. No one's making a damn thing because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's what Star Trek did. That's what Star Trek was so revolutionary. First interracial kiss on television was Captain Kirk kissing Uhura. So I just sometimes I just run up against a wall of like, just there's no more. I got no more outrage in me on this. But back to Eric's question, movies written by engineers? No, an engineer would write a workmanship-like story. It would be probably have a relatively interesting plot. The characters would be very one-dimensional. The dialogue would be appalling. These people are not engineers, and they're not writers either. They're not artists, and they're not engineers. They're just plain crybabies. They're just plain whiny crybabies. So anyway, so I think Star Trek could conceive. Look, I'm going to do the colonies, and if somebody offered me Star Trek, I would still do the colonies. But if somebody offered me Star Trek, like, Bill, you're now, it's Star Trek is yours, whatever you want to do, I get that thing back on the rails. First thing I would do is invent some kind of time warp to make this whole thing into, it's like, my first episode would be like the ending of the Newhart show where Bob Newhart wakes up and he's no longer running this inn in Vermont. He's back in bed with his wife in Chicago. Just, it's fan fiction, goodbye, gone. And then we'd start from scratch. When I say scratch, that's not what I meant. We'd start from the foundation. We'd start from the original series. The only problem I would have, if somebody gave me Star Trek, the only problem I would have would be if somebody said, "Hey, Bill, we want you to do what we gave to Jar Jar Abrams, and we're going to give you the whole thing." Obviously, Nimoy is dead, and so is McCoy, and so is DeForest Kelley, who I met and was a wonderful, nicest man in the world. DeForest Kelley and Mr. Green Jeans, two of the finest people I ever got a chance to encounter. So if you got a chance to do them all again, okay, I would do all of that. I'd keep everybody the same race, same sex. I wouldn't change anything because that's what worked and that's what people loved. My only problem if somebody gave me Star Trek would be how would I deal with the instrumentation? And to some degree the exterior of the Enterprise, but mostly the interior. It is, I mean, it's the best that science fiction could do on the budget in 1966. And those little gumdrop lights are really cool, but when it's time to steer the Enterprise, Sulu pushes a button. He shouldn't have a joystick. That throttle that they have in the Kelvin timeline is like, so you're going to push this thing and this thing controls the speed of the Enterprise, right? Uh-huh. Okay, so this would be 0, right? Yep. And this would be warp 8, right? Yep. And how are you going to get to warp factor 5? How are you going to know where that is? Are there indents? No, I'm just going to... it's these little things, right? The only part about the Star Trek bridge that I think actually, in a strange way, kind of holds up is that giant dial between the helmsman and the navigator station, which they hardly ever use, but that giant kind of navigation dial. And by the way, looking at the old series, the one thing that stands out to me now the most in the original series is how small the screen is, right? It's like that screen was a flat screen TV. Let's take. I've never thought about this before, but let's just go back for a little bit. 1966, you're sitting there watching Star Trek. Captain Kirk is sitting in the ultimate lazy boy, and he is watching a flat screen TV. And it's a decent. It's probably the size of this monitor. It's probably about a 60-inch maybe. But it's just tiny. It's just, this is it. Everybody in the room is looking at this little thing, So that would be the only problem I would have. But still, the things I saw on that little screen, and that well, I guess, I knew it was radar, that radar pulse sound. Fantastic. It just made me happy. It made me happy. It made a lot of people happy. It was hopeful and it was optimistic and upbeat. People want to come out of a theater or a TV show feeling better than they did when they went in, no matter what they tell you, no matter what they think, no matter how withered and atrophied their souls and personalities are. People want to feel good about entertainment, and they don't feel good about this abomination. How about if we do like one or two more? One more, maybe? One more? Andrew Wallace? Yes, I will. Oh, because I said I will be there. Will you? Glad to see you, Andrew. I'll do one more. And I don't recall this name before. It's a great name. Jaser McFarland. Wow. Bill, you wonderful person, you. Somebody is looking at Anton, whatchamacallit. He's a Russian guy who does a there's a YouTube channel on astronomy. He's fantastic. He's very low key, but he's so authentic and kind. And his sign on is hello, wonderful person, and goodbye, wonderful person. And he sells t-shirts that say hello, wonderful person. And I've read the comment sections on some of his videos. His videos are very, very good. He really knows his stuff. And time again in that, I see people saying, you're the only person that ever called me wonderful person. You're the first Anton Petrov, thank you. You've given me the will to live, kind of thing, right? It's just amazing how little things can be really big things. So anyway, thank you for the question there, Jaser McFarlane, you wonderful person, you. Please, for everything dark and grim in the distant future, apply for a position on the Warhammer 40K show that Henry Cavill and Amazon has partnered up on. I can't wait. Anton Petrov. Thank you. As an editor, what approaches would you take to avoid wokeness and stay true to the lore and the fans? Look, you can either make a woke 40K or you can make 40K. You can make a woke show about guys in armor, or you can make 40K. There is no woke 40K. 40K is powerful because it is antithesis of woke. It is the living antithesis of woke. That's what I love about it. Probably why Calville is in on it. And the fact that he's working on this and turned down The Witcher. I got to tell you, man, I didn't know anything about Henry Cavill's fan background. But to walk off of The Witcher because it wasn't The Witcher anymore, it was just getting too woke for him, He was a tremendously good Superman. He never had a decent script. He was great. He was ideal, perfect. He never, ever had a script that let Superman be Superman, meaning let him be wholesome. He's never been allowed to be wholesome. He's fantastic. And when I heard that there was a 40K show coming out, I couldn't believe it. When I heard that Calvo was attached to it, then I thought this thing may actually be good, because Calvo walked off of The Witcher because it wasn't The Witcher anymore. And if they bring him in the beginning, then he's coming in with some kind of chops. He's undoubtedly going to work for a lower price and bring his star power to it. So he's going to make sure that it's 40K. And the Emperor protects, as Sad Wings Raging says, the Emperor protects. And so as an editor, what would I do to avoid wokeness and stay true to the lore and the fans? As a writer, what stories best represent the Warhammer world, and which ones would you pick? Let's say you get 2 seasons with 8 episodes each, and if they were successful, you get 2 more. Okay, that's a great question. It's a great question. And it's a great question. Thank you. First of all, the first thing I'd have to fight is Games Workshop, the owners of 40K, because they're the ones that started doing female Astartes, and then they started doing a cartoon series where instead of them being like grimdark, they're just kind of like a big robot friend, It's like the Ultramarines are kind of like your big pals in armor. So the company that owns the brand is making it woke already. So that would just say they have nothing to do with this, or else I have nothing to do with it. If I had that kind of power, I'd say you created an amazing franchise here, and you're going to get a big piece of it, but you have no creative input on this that is not directly related to what was there before. We're not making any changes. We're going to make it grimmer and darker. There is a number of fan films on YouTube. There's a great 5-part one called Astartes, but there's one that's really, really good, and it takes place on board the ship, and they're going through the oh my God, how can I remember this? I hate it when my brain just locks up like this. I just haven't seen enough of it recently. What is their warp? The space continuum they go through. I've forgotten the name of it. Help me. I'm embarrassed. I don't remember this. It's the second somebody says I'm going to scream. They're going through such a huge part of it too. Help me. The realm of chaos. The space opens up and they go into the warp. The warp. How could I forget that? The warp. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so they go into the warp. And on this one particular thing on YouTube, I'll see if I can remember to put a link to it on the YouTube page here, because it's very, very good. It's very, 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 very dark. And there's all these creatures from the warp are materializing on board the ship, and the Geller fields are there protecting this thing. And it's like, it's freaking horrible. So here's the thing about 40K. And this is why I love 40K. I've read all of the 60 plus novels in the Horus Heresy. I've read all of the 7 books in the Siege of Terra series. The final book is turning into a 2-parter, but Dan Abnett is writing it. He's the one who wrote the first one. Dan Abnett got me into it because he's such a good writer. And read the first book, so I stuck around for the final 70. But they're breaking it up into 2 parts, and the first part I think is due out like now. I look for it yesterday. It's due any day now, that kind of thing. Anyway, so to avoid wokeness, I'd keep Games Workshop out of it, and I would quiz writers on this. You would have to convince me that you'd at least done your homework on this, if not lived in this environment. But I would clearly I wouldn't hire anybody. Not only would I not hire anybody who didn't know the background of 40K, I would not hire any single writer who did not have some kind of tragic experience in life. And I'm as serious as I can be about that. As serious as I can be. I would not hire anyone who has not been through some kind of awful tragedy. If somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, Bill, I'm a screenwriter and I was deployed in Iraq 2 times," I'd say, "Go. Go write. You're in. Congratulations, you're in." Because he's seen stuff that nobody wants to see, and that's the essence of what 40K is. 40K is almost camp. It's not camp. It's nothing like camp, but it is almost camp-like in its endless desire to find out where the bottom of human misery is. Right? That's what I love about 40K, is they have come up with yet another way to make the future even more horrible than it was before. Corpse paste. When I first read about corpse paste, I just thought, I love this, French. I love it. I love it. So I would make sure that the writers had some kind of background as people, and I'd want to know, especially, they don't have to know about the science stuff, because there's not much science in 40K at all, really. But they do have to know about authoritarianism, and they do have to know about brutality, and they do have to all be men. I'm pretty sure I would go with that. If a woman came to me with a 40K pitch, and it was about Astartes, I'd be very skeptical. Now, if she came at me with a 40K pitch about the Sisters of Silence, it's rock on. I think if you're going to write a Sisters of Silence episode, that needs to be written by a woman, because those are the essential elements of what makes the Astartes and Sisters of Silence different. This is why I hate the idea of women Astartes. It's the same reason as I started this whole rant on 2.5 hours ago, right? There can't be poor people in space, because for the same reason you can't have female Astartes, because you never run out of males. You will never run out of male candidates before you need to get to women. So Bill, if you want to come out of the theater feeling better than you went in, so where does 40K come in? Sounds like you feel worse. Yes, but I don't believe in battle sisters. It's just plain woke nonsense. There's not a female body in the galaxy that will ever be able to make it to Astartes, because the biggest, strongest of the trillions and trillions and trillions of males in the society, most of them don't make it. So it's gone. In my world, it doesn't exist. Sisters of Silence exists. Captains of spaceships exists. But that, no. And by the way, the genius, really, the genius. So for those of you not up on it, so Astartes are the giant superhuman space marines. They're genetically engineered super warriors. And as usual, the women said, well, we want to be part of that. Well, you can't be part of that. It's a men's club. You can't be part of this. Well, we want to. And they made enough noise to finally all say, so now you're in the club. Congratulations. Now we have smaller Astartes, smaller, weaker Astartes. So they're not, so what's the point, right? Why not just go with Imperial Guard? But what they did do for women is they created the Sisters of Silence. They gave them a very, 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 very strange power. Very strange power. In a world of psychic activity, the 40K universe is powered by psychic activity. The navigators are all psychers. And in fact, the enemy of humanity is all of humanity's emotional negativity embodied in the real world. The warp is created by and populated by every violent, nasty thought. And so the more you fight, the stronger the warp gets. So that's a great point there. Rough Ryan says a woman could write the horrors of being a victim in Warhammer. Absolutely right. Yes, if I had a survivor story, that'd be my go-to person by far. In any event, this is the thing. They gave the Sisters of Silence. They basically said that these women have no souls. And since they have no souls, they have no psychic presence. And even people who are not psychers feel an automatic kind of repugnance to them. There's something wrong. I don't know what it is, but there's something wrong. They don't have a soul. And actual psychers will go insane in their presence. But what they are essentially is they're a form of kryptonite. They're like a dampening field. Wherever these things are, psychic power is essentially neutralized. It's like an acid. So they're really important. And when they're deployed well, they're critical. It's a very interesting it's almost a misogynistic power to give to women, but then what would you expect from 40K? 40K doesn't treat anybody well, right? Yes, women can be, yes, they absolutely can. What are we going to do with them? Well, why don't we have, how about if we write them so that certain rare mutants of them don't have any souls? Do it. Now, as a writer, what stories would best represent the Warhammer world, and which ones would you pick? Okay, I've been talking about 40K, 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 and hundreds of times on numerous Stratosphere lounges and Stratosphere studio shows, but the bottom line is I'm actually not a 40K fan. I'm a 30K fan. I would tell the 30K story. I got into 40K by the 30K story, and when that enormous, there's certainly the most epic story ever is the Horus Heresy. And when that was over, it's not over yet, but we know what happens because 40K is the present, and what happened 10,000 years ago is what's interesting. So in 40K, you've got a world where all of these things that happened 10,000 years ago have had tremendous repercussions. And so we've broken the Astartes up into thousands of little chapters instead of legions, which were 12 legions, right? Sorry, 18 legions. And we basically diffused all this stuff out. But to me, by far, I don't know how I would, if I was given 40K, I would say we're telling the Horus Heresy story, or else there's no point in doing anything. There's just no point in it, right? The Horus Heresy is the most 75 novels. I read them all. Some of them were just astonishingly good, and some of them were just plain filler, but I read every single word of every single one of them. 75 novels. I'm not aware of anything. Lord of the Rings doesn't even come close to that in terms of granularity, right? Detail. So I would tell the story of 30K. So basically 10,000 years before the present, is when all of this stuff started. You've got the emperor, the god emperor of mankind, and I first saw that when I was just getting into 30K. Oh, you've got an emperor, great. That's fresh. That's original. Yeah, a star spanning. A star-spanning human civilization that's an empire with an emperor. That's fresh. And then I find out he's the corpse emperor. He's essentially dead. You have to kill 1,000 psychers a day to maintain his life force. He's a living corpse. What now? Yeah, he burned. He was mortally wounded 10,000 years ago, and he's now just a corpse, slowly dying. You have to kill 10,000. You have to kill 1,000 people a day just to keep this guy alive. That's kind of different. What's his name? His name is the Emperor. Okay, but what's his real name? His name is the Emperor. He's the Emperor of mankind. He's always been the Emperor of mankind. Before anybody knew him, before he even appeared in history, he was the Emperor of mankind. He's the ultimate psyker, ultimate human psyker. That's a little different. So it's not like he's not succeeded by, oh, come on, Bill. Come on, you can do it. Strephon. He's not emperor, so he's not Strephon the first. He's Strephon the second. No. He's there's one guy, and he creates in a laboratory 20 different strains of soldiers from his own DNA, and he purposely makes each one of these 20 strains slightly different in terms of their characteristics. Some of them are just gung-ho, chew through the cement with their teeth thing. Other guys are other legions are very, very secretive, very quiet, and they're all kind of espionage and so on. I'm talking to you, Alpha Legion. And then what he did was he made like an avatar of each one of these 20 different strains of super soldiers. They were the genetic, actually he made them first. They're called the Primarchs. He made 20 sons. Each one of them had slightly different characteristics. All of them were super brilliant, super strong, all of this other stuff. But they all had different personality types. And then from these 20 Primarchs, he took their genetics and made legions out of them. You take humans, strong humans, you inject them full of all this stuff, you put all these organs into them, you do all this surgery and stuff, and most of them die, but those that don't become these super warriors called Astartes. But the Astartes are still just pale shadows of the Primarchs because there's only 20 Primarchs, and they're hundreds of thousands, not millions of Astartes. Okay, now you've got the Primarchs, and that to me is the absolutely the most brilliant thing ever. The Primarchs, and forget even the Primarchs, right? I could tell with my current level of understanding, I'm not a longtime fan, I'm not a particularly deep fan, I'm a 30K fan. I could probably tell a story without the Primarchs, but I couldn't tell a story without the legions. In the current universe of 40K, like I said, there's thousands of chapters because the legions became so powerful that they destroyed human civilization. They civil war against each other. But the legions are what makes 40K interesting to me, right? I don't know anything about any of these modern chapters, but I do know the legions. Now, as an interesting experiment here, where I'm about to embarrass myself, but we'll all just play along. It's been a while. Who's my favorite Primarch? I'm embarrassed to tell you who my favorite Primarch is because my favorite Primarch it's like my favorite Primarch is like me being a New York Yankees fan, right? It's like, oh, you're a Yankees fan, fantastic. Well, that's rare, right? They win all the time, right? No. But I am. My favorite Primarch is Roboute Guilliman. Because I am lawful good. That's my personal orientation, lawful good. And he is the force of lawful good. So I'm an Ultramarines guy. So I wanted to, just for the fun of it, even though it's going to be some dead air, it's late in the show, and most of the people who've got things to do with their lives have already left, so we're going to just play with this for a second. I'm trying to see if I can remember the legions. Now, I'm not going to try to get them by the number because I used to be able to do that. If I can just get the names, you would say, well, how many legions are there? There's 18. Yeah, but you said there were 20 Primarchs. Yes, there were. But two of them, the 2nd and 11th, right? Primarchs, I think, disappeared. And what happened to the legions? We don't know. Something awful. So they're kind of holding this on. And Dorn is my second favorite. I'm very, very, very close to being Dorn and the Imperial Fist. Dorn is definitely my second favorite. So each one of these Primarchs has different characteristics, and their legions have those same characteristics. And so people who come into the fandom in the 30K universe find themselves attracted to the legion that best represents their kind of emotional core. The Alpha Legion is extraordinarily secretive. Everybody says that it's kind of like I am Spartacus, right? Everybody's Alpharius in the Alpha Legion. They have fighting Primarchs, but that's not what they're good at. They're good at espionage. They're good at infiltration. They're plotters. They're all of that stuff. Ultramarines are like the Boy Scouts. The Imperial Fists are the defenders of Earth. They essentially never leave Earth. Rogel Dorn is there to prevent anybody from hurting the Emperor, and he ends up protecting the Emperor against the most powerful force ever, but the Emperor is mortally wounded. So anyway, back and forth you go. I've seen that, by the way, the text-to-speech device. Thanks for bringing that up. So if you're one of those guys who's like, here come the horror. If you're one of these guys that like Zulu, like really love the movie Zulu, where you got 120 redcoats versus 8,000 Zulus, and that whole kind of thing, we're in this thing, and we got to just use our plain grit and firepower, then Imperial Fist and Rogel Dorn is your guy. So I'm just trying to see if I can remember the 18 legions, not in any particular order. So if I get the numbers, I'll remember. But so the first is Lionel Johnson, and that is there's a little bit of overlap here. There's too many wolves and too many irons, so they would be the Dark Angels, I think. That's one. Fulgrim's Legion. It's been a while. I used to know this stuff so well. Fulgrim's Legion is Emperor's Children. I don't know. I'm not gonna try and get the numbers. I just plain forget it. Ultramarines, Emperor's Children, Word Bearers, Night Stalkers, I'm remembering the Primarch's name. Salamanders. What are the Corvus's Legion? The Ravens? No. Space Wolves. Sorry. I'm embarrassing myself now. So, see, I can remember the name of the Primarchs. I can't remember the name of their thing. I'm embarrassed. World Eaters, right? That's so. Here's somebody listing them. World Eaters, that's Angron's Legion. Blood Angels is Sanguinius's Legion. Space Wolves would be Leman Russ, right? Iron Fists were Ferrus Manus. World Eaters were Angron. Thousand Suns, that was Magnus. Salamanders was Vulcan. Come on, give me the rest of them. Put them up there. I've got to have some kind of way to... Luna Wolves became Horus's... Sons of Horus? Horus's children? Sons of Horus, I think. Come on, give me some more. Come on, give me some more. Give me, just so I can name the Primarchs. Here's something: if the Emperor is dying, why doesn't he just make a complete clone of himself? I don't know. Raging 30K, I love 30K, so that's what I would do. It's just the story is just so profound, and not only are the Primarchs and the Legions just the guts of the thing, but they're so defined. They're so different. They're so different looking. You got Fulgrim, who's this foppish kind of, just everything that his Legion does is all about perfection, and they're all in purple and gold. They've got all this ornamentation, and and it's just kind of looking like hairdressers and all the rest of it. And then you've got let me think. Iron Warriors, let's say. Right? They're just plain grunts. There's just a battering ram. Boom. White Scars. That's a great Legion. So anyway, it's really, 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 really in depth. I'm really looking forward to it. There's an actual chance I might put in a bid to write a script for that. I really think that would be kind of cool. I really think I might just think about that. So it's a Legion of Quares. Yes, that would be Fulgrim. Yeah. Emperor's Children are legions of Quares. Somebody, I just love doing it. So the Ultramarines are reboot. That's the 13th Legion. The White Scars are great. The Death. What is it Death Eaters, Mortarians Legion? This is the part I get a little weird. Anyway, it's fantastic. I love it, and I would go right to that. I would tell the story of the Horus Heresy in the first 2 seasons, and if that went, then I would immediately deal with the aftermath of it, and then I'd let things kind of fall the way they do. I really like the Gaunt's series. And my brain's really getting cooked now. Gaunt's Ghosts, fantastic series. The Tanith First and Only. So somebody wrote a series on just one company of Imperial Guards, and it was just fantastic. So the Imperial Guards are the humans, and they do most of the dirty work. And they call in the Astartes Supermen when they need to. Anyway, all right, Eric says there's another question. All right, Eric, I'm gonna kick that one till next week because it's a large one. Thank you very much for the song, but bring the question back next week and we'll do it. All right, so hey, it's time for this one. We don't have in Rosalind Wills, and time for this one to go home, something like that. I don't remember. It's been a while. So yeah, that's it. Checking out. We're done. I got some writing to do, and I'll have writing to do until the 5th of March. Then I'll record this baby. That'll take a week. And then I can go back to everything. Mr. Wizard, that was it. Help, Mr. Wizard. Then we will go back to all the stuff that this channel was put out there in the first place for. Just as we launched it, it's like you must spend full time for now for 4 months on this project for Daily Wire. With that said, I think it's really, really good. I really think it's good. And the more I see coming out of Ukraine on a daily basis, the more I realize it's a curse on these people. It's a self-inflicted curse. There's a Russian propagandist. He's the ultimate tough guy. And he's saying, well, we should start this Ukraine war by, first thing we need to do is nuke London. And then we'll get to, when we pushed our way all the way to the tip of the Iberian Peninsula and we've got Lisbon under our control, then we can take care of those Americans across the pond kind of thing. And I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, you guys are having a real hard time. I know this is politics. I'm just going to bring it up just because it flew into my head. But what was the guy's point? It was actually kind of a cool point. Something to the effect of that Putin would use nuclear weapons rather than fight NATO conventionally, because if NATO fought the Russians conventionally, he said the casualty ratio would be 1,000 to 1. I think that's about right. We put A-10s in there and it's game over, man. We'd have air superiority in 2 hours. That'd be the end of that. Anyway, so yes, the Emperor protects, and that'll do it. And the show's made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com, who continue to keep these little gems a coming. So I will get this baby downloaded and posted, get the show ready for tomorrow, and we are approaching the end of this long dry spell, for which I am very, very grateful for so many of you members who've been sticking around, even though I have been below par on my deliveries. I really believe, I really believe that when you see it, you'll have appreciated that the time was worth it. Because this stuff, the historical stuff for Daily Wire is forever. It's really, really good, I think. Okay. Anyway, that'll do it. Thanks for joining us. We will see you Thursday for Stratosphere Lounge. And unless something really bizarre happens, I'll see you here back again on Monday for more show business talk on the Stratosphere Studio. Good night.